Snow whispered over the battlements of Winterfell like restless ghosts, corkscrewing in tight eddies where the wind gnawed at ancient stone. Dawn's first light bled slowly across the eastern sky, a pale silver glow that did not warm so much as reveal. The pitted arrow slits, the blackened burn marks from some forgotten skirmish, the frost that spider-webbed every iron fitting. Jaime Lannister stood alone upon the rampart, mailed hands resting lightly on the hilt of his sheathed longsword, and let the hush of the north seep into him. It was an austere hush, at once accusing and strangely consoling, nothing like the honeyed murmurs of King's Landing or the scented quiet of Casterly Rock. The air here tasted of iron and pine and old promises. Somewhere below, a direwolf howled, raw-voiced and solitary. The sound still unnerved him. Wolves had always been creatures of storybooks in the South, symbols wielded by singers to frighten or to thrill. But here, in this stark gray dawn, they were flesh and blood, quick and savage, the living sigil of the house that now, however improbably, sheltered a lion within its walls. A shiver traveled his spine, and he could not say whether it owed more to the wind or the memory of how narrowly all of this had come undone. A single push, a single sickening moment, when a boy's small body had teetered on a broken sill high in a half-ruined tower. The Kingslayer no longer tried to soften it with old justifications. He had pushed the Stark child. He had done it for love of Cersei and for fear of truth. He had almost shattered the fragile peace between two great houses. Yet fate, or the gods, if they still bothered with men, had intervened. Bran Stark had clung to a crumbling stone and found purchase. Jaime's heart had stalled as the boy scrambled back, eyes round, lips trembling. The boy had seen everything, and with a single ragged breath, the path of Jaime's life had forked. A duel in silence had followed. Bran's wide, terrified gaze against Jaime's cold, golden mask. The boy had not screamed. Jaime had not drawn steel. Nothing had been spoken in that tower, yet everything had been confessed. Later, as Lord Eddard's desperate riders scoured the grounds hunting shadows, Jaime had gone down upon one knee in the godswood beneath the heart tree's bleeding face and asked the old gods for mercy he was not certain they could grant. What else could he do? Even a lion knew when it was cornered. The memory still burned. The words he had offered Ned Stark under the heart tree, the breathtaking boldness of them, and the stunned quiet afterward as ravens rustled overhead. He had confessed only what was needful, that the Queen and he were bound by more than blood, that the boy had seen. He had not tried to cleanse himself in excuse. He had knelt, the proudest knight in the Seven Kingdoms, and begged Winterfell's lord to make judgment. Ned Stark had stared at him for a long time, the wind combing gray threads through dark hair. At last he had said, in a voice ragged with unbelief and fury, that the gods had perhaps spared the boy so men might be tested. "I should take your head," Stark had said, hand tight around the hilt of ice. "Yet war would follow, and war would devour my children as surely as yours." Hours of argument and raw confession had stretched into the long autumn night, and when dawn broke, Jaime Lannister remained alive, bound by honor to stand at Winterfell, until Lord Stark returned from King's Landing, and the boy Bran opened his eyes and spoke what he would. That dawn felt 100 lifetimes ago, yet it had been scarcely 2 moons. 2 moons in which Jaime had tasted a different life, no longer gilded by court flattery or dulled by tourney pageantry, but sharpened daily upon the austerity of the North. The Starks watched him like hawks. The small folk whispered of lions wearing sheep's fleece. Yet the old castle accepted him in its own manner. Hours by the forge with Mikken, testing northern steel. Mornings on the training yard with Hallis Mullen's guardsmen, drilling tight shield walls to repel wildling spear rushes. Evenings in the great hall, mead steaming in trenchers while Robb Stark read dispatches from White Harbor, and Jon Snow, bastard no more to Jaime's eyes, stood silent at the hearth's edge, brooding over some unspoken sorrow. In this place, each day demanded honesty from a man, whether he wished it or no. And so it was that the Kingslayer had discovered how rarely he had been honest in all his life. Boots scuffed on stone behind him. Jaime turned to find Sir Roderick Castle approaching, whiskers stiff with frost. The master-at-arms inclined his head, courteous, if not quite warm. Trust came slow to northerners. "Sir Jaime," Roderick said, breath pluming. "Lord Robb requests your counsel in the great hall." A raven arrived from the wall in the night. Dark tidings. Jaime arched a brow. Another ranging lost. Roderick's expression tightened. "No ranging. Something worse or stranger. The bird came from Lord Commander Mormont himself. He speaks of dead men walking." Jaime let that settle between them. "Walkers," he echoed softly, recalling half-forgotten tales told to squires around campfires. "Ghost stories." "Aye, ghost stories," Roderick said, voice flat. "Yet Lord Robb means to treat them as warnings, not fables. He bids you come." "Aye." The great hall was a damp cavern compared to the sunny courts of the south, its rafters hung with spears instead of silks, but a fire roared on the dais, and the smell of fresh bread lofted comfortingly. Robb Stark stood beside the high table, fists planted on a map whose curling edges were weighted by daggers. Jon Snow leaned close, dark curls hanging loose, while Theon Greyjoy lounged nearby, all languid arrogance, a wolf in spirit, if not in blood. Catelyn Stark watched from a side chair, fingers white around a cup of mulled wine. At her feet dozed the direwolf Grey Wind, ribs rising and falling like a bellows. When Jaime entered, Roderick shadowing him, talk ceased. Suspicion flared in Theon's green eyes, yet Robb's expression held only grave calculation. The boy was 16 perhaps, still rounded in cheek yet already bearing the weight of his father's keep. Jaime tried to imagine Tywin trusting him with such responsibility at that age, and failed. Robb gestured to a place across the map. "Sir Jaime." Jaime inclined his head and stepped forward. Jon stiffened, but said nothing. "Mormont's letter," Robb said, voice low. "He writes of 2 rangers discovered beyond the wall. They had died, clearly unmistakably, and yet they rose again within Castle Black's infirmary and attacked their brothers. Blades did not daunt them. Only fire." Jon's throat bobbed. "I have seen things, Robb. Ghosts in the woods, shapes that do not breathe." His gray eyes flicked to Jaime, challenging silently. "Mock if you dare." Jaime lifted a hand. "I have crossed 3 kingdoms and seen wonders enough to humble the vainest singer. I will not mock what I have not witnessed." Catelyn's voice, soft yet iron-strong, cut through the hush. "Lord Commander Mormont begs for men and dragonglass. He fears the wall may not hold, should these creatures come in number." Robb touched the map. "Lord Stark rides south to serve as hand. Our levies are thin while autumn harvests demand every spare back. Yet honor will not let us ignore the watch. Nor will politics," Jaime thought. "Allow the North's ancestral guardians to fall, and chaos follows. The sort of chaos in which Lannisters historically flourished. But the lion in this hall wore new colors now. How many riders could you spare?" 100 seasoned men, no more," Robb said. "My mother counsels caution. I counsel readiness." A pause, then, "I would have you lead them, Sir Jaime." The offer stunned the hall. Theon's mouth fell open. Even Jon's dark scowl slipped. Catelyn's inhale was sharp as a drawn blade. Jaime's tongue felt thick. "You would trust me with 100 of your best?" he asked quietly. Robb met his gaze squarely. "You swore to stand for House Stark until my father returns. Men say oaths mean little to Lannisters, prove them liars." A younger Jaime, golden-hearted, reckless, would have laughed and tipped an insolent bow. But that boy had died long before Bran Stark's climb. The man who remained could only nod. "Very well. I will lead them. But I counsel speed. Winter is not a season to court slowly." "Agreed," Robb said. "Leave at first light tomorrow." Preparations consumed the day. Steel was hammered blunt-sharp. Ravens were penned. Barrels of black glass arrowheads were dredged from dusty vaults, seldom opened since the Age of Heroes. Jaime walked the yard with Roderick, selecting men whose loyalty to Winterfell outweighed any grievance against the Kingslayer. It was not a long list at first, but trust grew strangely fast beneath the discipline of necessity. By dusk 40 names had become 80, and by moonrise, a full 105 hard northerners had strapped on cloaks bearing the direwolf. Jaime retired late to the small tower chamber allotted him, bone-weary yet restless. He laid his sword on the table, its edge catching lamplight in dull crimson. Kingslayer, the blade seemed to whisper. Oathbreaker. Yet here it was, preparing to ride north in defense of all men, not just kings. Could a sword be forgiven for the hand that wielded it? A soft knock startled him. He bid entrance, and Catelyn Stark stepped in, cloak drawn tight. "My lady," he said, rising. "I will not stay long," she said, eyes as pale as winter lakes. "I came to ask if you know what you undertake. I know cold and steel, I know men." He sighed, brow creasing. "I do not know the things your Lord Commander claims walk in darkness, but I mean to learn." Catelyn looked away, as though steadying herself. "If you fail them, if you fail my sons, then I welcome your vengeance." Jaime finished gently. "For what little comfort it grants, I swear on all my honor that I will see them safe." A bitter curve touched her lips. "Honor," she murmured. "Do you recall its taste, sir?" He could not blame her skepticism. So he answered with the only currency Winterfell respected. "I recall it well enough to miss it." She left without further word, but in her wake lingered a faint scent of pine and frost. A scent that spoke of morning withheld. Dawn came in a sheet of sullen gray. Horses snorted steam. Harnesses jingled. Ravens objected noisily to men below. Jaime swung into the saddle of a rangy gray gelding commandeered from the stables, wearing plate polish to a muted sheen and a heavy black cloak, trimmed in snowy fur. He thought of his father's crimson mantle and felt no longing. The column assembled in the courtyard. 105 riders, banners furled to half-masts to quicken their passage. At their head, Robb Stark sat astride a smoky chestnut destrier, not riding north but seeing them off. Beside him, Grey Wind paced, hackles rippling, the wolf's eyes fixed on Jaime, with an almost human question. Jon Snow stood farther back, and for the first time since Jaime had arrived, the bastard's gray gaze held something like reluctant respect. Trumpets did not sound. Winterfell's gate simply creaked open, and hooves clattered across the drawbridge. Beyond lay the King's Road, a white ribbon winding between leagues of forest turned to skeletal silhouettes under gathering frost. Jaime lifted a mailed hand, and the riders spurred forward into the teeth of the north. Each mile peeled away another layer of the south that clung to him. By the second day, his fine Lannister gloves were stained with pine pitch from makeshift torches. By the third, a raw wind had chafed his cheeks until they stung crimson. The men warmed to him grudgingly, impressed less by titles than by grit. He took no special comforts, shared no finer rations. At night, he walked the perimeter himself, hearing the forest breathe, feeling its eyes upon him. The wall drew them onward like a pale blade raised against the sky. They reached Castle Black beneath a moon that hung swollen and red, as though bleeding across the heavens. Even the hard men of the watch looked small beneath that looming wall of ice, its face cracked and weeping, older than kingdoms. Lord Commander Mormont met them in the courtyard, a great shaggy bear of a man whose gaze took in Jaime with wariness equal to respect. "So they send lions north," he rumbled after introductions were made. "Perhaps the gods fancy a jest." Jaime inclined his head. "If so, let us not disappoint them." His gaze flicked to a pair of black-clad youths leading ghostly pale horses. "Your men look thin." Mormont's mouth became a grim line. "They're thinner where they're dead." He ushered them into the common hall, where a fire guttered low and every face seemed carved from stone. It was there that Jaime saw the bodies, a pair sewn into stiff shrouds of black wool, laid across trestle tables dusted with frost. The hall smelled of smoke and old fear. "They burned the ones that rose," Mormont said quietly. "These two we cut from a snowbank yesterday, deep as a dungeon. Their flesh is wrong." He pulled back a shroud. Jaime's breath caught. The ranger's skin was blanched white, tight as parchment, and black crust rimmed pale blue lips. But it was the eyes that rooted him, open, glassy, and colorless, as though frost had devoured the irises. We will burn them at dusk, Mormont said. Until then, torches remain lit. Blades stay drawn. That night, wall torches made long wavering shadows of every man's fear. Jaime walked the battlements with a pair of watchmen, knuckles tight around leather grips. Beyond the wall, the forest stretched endless and unknowable, its silence deeper than any dungeon. He tried to imagine what moved in that darkness, what dead men walked, what whispers of winter older than memory. A creak sounded behind him, small as a pine knot snapping in a hearth. He spun. The watchman beside him had stiffened, head tilted as though listening to some distant cry. His eyes were wide and milk white. Jaime shouted a warning even as the man lunged, axe whistling. Steel rang, sparks spat across ice. The second watchman sprinted forward to drag the possessed ranger back. But the dead thing fought with jagged ferocity. Jaime's sword bit into its collarbone and stuck. There was no blood, only a hard crunch like ice cleaving ice. Torches raised. They forced the creature against a merlin, rested it over the side. It toppled soundlessly. Far below, in the courtyard, torches flared anew as shouts rose. Jaime retrieved his sword, breath ragged, and looked over the rampart. The corpse twitched amid drifting snow, limbs jerking as though in furious dream. Then it struggled upright, skull lolling, and lurched toward a knot of startled recruits. Flames blossomed. The creature shrieked as fire caught dry sinew. Smoke spiraled into the night. Afterwards, Jaime stood in the yard watching embers fade to sullen glow. Ash clung to his cloak. The wind smelled of burned meat. Lord Commander Mormont found him there. "You see what we face." "I see," Jaime murmured. "Your Northmen will help," Mormont said. "But the realm must learn. The wall alone cannot stand." Jaime thought of King's Landing, of Cersei's perfumed chambers, of Robert's drunken councils, of various whispers. A realm too busy with petty wars and whispered scandals to heed ghost stories. The thought chilled him more than the night air. Word was sent. Ravens winged south burdened with warnings. Meanwhile, Jaime set about reforging the Watch's ragged defense. Northmen drilled with Black Brothers. Dragonglass arrowheads were lashed to shafts. Windows were boarded, torches soaked in pitch. Yet for each measure of readiness, another danger loomed. Some dead thing beyond the wall learning, perhaps, that Castle Black now sheltered more warm blood than before. Days blurred. Each dawn found Jaime on horseback, ranging the forest and among ruined watch posts, half buried in snow. Tracks appeared where no living foot could tread. Once, a rider found half a hand curled like a withered leaf upon a drift, fingers black and rigid. Another time they came upon a ring of trees whose trunks were carved with faces, their mouths twisted in silent screams. The men whispered of the others, and torches burned all night. Through it all, Jaime felt something shift inside him, as though each breath of icy air scraped away another layer of guilt to reveal the raw metal beneath. He had lived half a life for appearances, for oaths mouthed and broken, for love that poisoned as surely as it inflamed. Here, on the edge of the world, none of that mattered. A man's worth was measured by the steadiness of his hand and the courage in his heart. One afternoon, while sun slanted weakly across the yard, he found Jon Snow practicing with a dragonglass dagger against straw dummies outfitted in black mail. The bastard's movements were swift, economical. Sweat darkened his collar, not from heat but sheer exertion in the chill. Jaime watched until Jon halted, chest heaving. "You fought well enough against that corpse," Jon said tersely, wiping his brow. "Saved Dirk's life, perhaps." Jaime shrugged. "A fair trade. My honor for a green boy's future." Jon's eyes narrowed. "I misjudged you, Kingslayer." "You judged true," Jaime said softly. "I have earned each curse thrown my way. The question is whether a man may earn something better after." Jon considered that. "Men say the wall changes a person. Winterfell changed me first," Jaime replied and surprised himself with the warmth that stirred in his chest. 2 weeks passed. Ravens returned from Winterfell with grim tidings. Lord Stark had been arrested in King's Landing after accusing the Queen of treason. Robb raised the banners of the North. The realm trembled on the brink of civil war. The news struck Jaime like a hammer. Honor demanded one course, love another, duty a third. He paced the ramparts alone beneath thin moonlight, weighing impossible choices. If he rode south to stand beside the Queen, he abandoned an oath to Ned Stark and imperiled the Wall. If he remained, he condemned his family to enemies' blades. The night stretched on, cold as judgment. When dawn lit the Wall in blood-orange brilliance, he had decided. He sought out Lord Commander Mormont. "I must ride," Jaime said, voice rough. "Not south. Southward is madness, with civil war brewing. I ride to Winterfell. The North will need every sword loyal to it, and I have sworn." Mormont studied him. "Will the lion fight for the wolf?" "For the realm," Jaime answered, and the words felt true, surprising him. Mormont nodded. "Go, then. But take care. The road south is colder now, and dead men march faster than living." Jaime mustered a score of riders, brothers and Northmen alike, and struck south along the King's Road. Snow fell thick, muffling hoofbeats, swallowing tracks almost as quickly as they formed. Nights were haunted by distant howls, not wholly wolfish. Twice, shapes moved just beyond the torchlight, tall, pale, gliding silently through swirling drifts. Torches drove them back. Dragonglass arrowheads vanished into the dark with no cry to mark their strike. On the seventh night, as the column camped within sight of the last river's frozen span, a storm rolled in, wind screaming like every damned soul ever lost to winter. Tents tore from stakes, horses reared, and out of the white blindness came figures, their eyes blue as glacier hearts. The dead. Steel clashed. Dragonglass shattered on brittle bone. Jaime fought like a man possessed, each breath a blade in his lungs. He felled a wight whose face was nothing but rime and rage, only to have another seize his cloak from behind. Fire, he remembered. Firesome. He wrenched free, seized a torch, rammed it into the creature's chest. It shrieked high and thin. His ears rang. When dawn finally lifted the horizon, they counted losses. 4. Good men, 1 horse, and much courage. Yet they had survived. Jaime wrapped the bodies in oil-soaked cloth and burned them atop a cairn of ice-slick stones. The smoke trailed behind them like a banner of sorrow. Winterfell's towers rose mere days later, dark against pearl-gray sky. Guards hailed them from the walls, and gates swung wide. Jaime rode through, feeling the weight of every eye upon him. In the courtyard awaited Robb Stark, ringed by sworn swords in mail darker than midnight. He stepped forward, face drawn with fatigue and something harsher, resolve tempered by grief. Beside him stood Catelyn, Jon, and Maester Luwin. "You kept your oath," Robb said, voice rough. "Father is imprisoned, the realm is fracturing, and winter itself marches. I need every friend Winterfell can claim." Jaime dismounted. "Then claim me." He knelt, not in surrender nor deceit, but in fealty freely given at last. Snow swirled around them, soft as a blessing. Somewhere high above, a direwolf howled, and for the first time its voice sounded less like accusation than welcome. Thus the lion began to wear the wolf's shadow, and the days that followed were a crucible of frost and fire. The North gathered beneath Winterfell's banners. Clansmen from the fells, tall Karstark spearmen, deep-voiced Mormont women bearing axes. They looked upon Jaime with wary eyes, yet the story spread. How the Kingslayer had stood the wall's night watch, how he had burned the dead and brought warning south. Jaime trained with them, ate salted pork by their fires, listened to their stories of frozen lakes and midnight suns. With each tale, he felt more the outsider, and yet curiously more at home. Perhaps home was not a place of blood but of purpose. One evening, as crimson dusk bled across the snows, he found Catelyn Stark in the Godswood, kneeling before the heart tree. She did not rise when he approached. "My lady," he said quietly, "I have heard from King's Landing. My brother Tyrion has been named acting hand. He sends word that forces loyal to the crown march north to quash rebellion." Catelyn's shoulders tensed, yet her voice was steady. "The crown marches upon its own people." "Upon yours," Jaime agreed. "And mine, for I am Lannister still." She turned, eyes glistening. "Why do you stay, sir?" Your loyalties must tear you in two. Not mine? They do, he admitted. And yet, perhaps torn is how a heart must be before it grows anew. Her gaze searched his face. If winter spares us, there will come a reckoning between Stark and Lannister. Then let me stand on the line and hold it closed, he said. For the living's sake. Snowflakes melted in her hair. She bowed her head, and that was answer enough. War came as January's darkest child, but it was not Lannister gold that glimmered first on the horizon. It was ice-rimmed shadow. Scouts rode hard from the neck, with tales of villages found empty, doors torn from hinges, fields black with frost, despite the harvest season past. No tracks of men or horse, only pale footprints that did not sink. Robb called council in Winterfell's hall. Lords crowded the benches. Karstark, Tallheart, Glover, Mormont. At the high table sat Catelyn and Maester Luwin. Jon Snow stood behind Robb's right shoulder. Jaime took a place at the left, ringed by Stark guards, a courtesy and a warning. A hush descended as Robb unrolled a tattered cloak stained with icy filigree. My scouts found this 5 leagues south of the Shadow Tower, he said. Its owner wore black. She also wore steel, shattered. He paused. There were no bones within. A murmur ran through the lords. Dragons dead 3 centuries. Giants extinct since before the conquest. Yet somehow the stories of the long night came leaping from hearthside to hall, whispering of the others, the White Walkers. Jaime watched seasoned men glance uneasily toward torches that guttered in the draft. Robb slammed a gauntleted fist onto the map. If Winter's dead cross the wall, then no castle will stand. We march north to meet them before they reach us. To war with ghosts, that was Lord Rickard Karstark, gray-bearded and grim. Better ghosts than Lannister's steel, Theon muttered, earning a sharp look from Robb. They are not ghosts, Jaime said, voice cutting through the tangle. I have crossed blades with them. They break like ice but do not bleed. Fire consumes them. Dragonglass pierces their hearts. Treat them as men, and you will die. Silence followed. Finally, Lady Mage Mormont rose, square-shouldered. The North remembers its legends. If the lion bears witness, the bear believes. She thumped her fist to her chest. The Mormonts ride. One by one, lords pledged swords. Yet dread lingered. Jaime felt it not in his own gut, though he had faced that dread already. He understood now why men invented chivalry, to stand between them and fear. That night he could not sleep. He walked the silent halls until his wandering feet led him, almost without thought, to Bran Stark's chamber. A single brazier burned inside, casting soft glow upon carved toys and scrolls. Bran sat propped in bed, legs covered in furs, eyes bright with feverish curiosity. "Sir Jaime," the boy greeted, voice thin but alert. Jaime bowed his head. "Lord Bran." "You never visit," Bran said. "I thought perhaps you were afraid of me." "Of your father's judgment, perhaps," Jaime admitted. "But not of you." Bran studied him. "The wolves told me you would come." Jaime blinked. "The wolves." Bran smiled faintly and looked past him, to a window where snow fluttered like white moths. "They whisper, sometimes, when the world grows still." "Sir." Jaime felt a chill that had nothing to do with drafts. What do they whisper now? "That winter is here," Bran said softly. Outside in the yard, a horn sounded once, low, distant, and lonely. Jaime froze. A heartbeat later it sounded again. And again, 3 times total. Behind that third blast rolled a rumble like thunder, yet the sky was clear. The door flew open. Jon Snow burst in. Sword belt half fastened, eyes blazing. "To arms? Riders from the south bring dire tidings." Jaime's heart kicked. "Not Lannisters." "Worse," Jon whispered. "The dead." He turned, and Bran's small voice followed them into the night. "Burn them all." Torches painted the courtyard in flickering gold. Snow fell harder now, thick wet flakes that hissed on iron. Jaime joined Robb and the assembled lords as a terrified rider. A Karstark bannerman slid from his horse, cloak torn, face streaked with frost. "They come," he gasped. "A host, my lord, 10 leagues behind. Corpses, thousands, and things taller than men. Eyes like blue suns." Shock knifed through the gathering. Lords looked to their retainers, to their sons, to the torches. "How long?" Robb demanded. "Hours," the rider croaked. "They march without rest. We could not slow them." Catelyn clutched her cloak. "The walls. Walls will hold little against such numbers," Jaime said. "Fire will." "Stores of pitch?" Robb asked Maester Luwin. "Not enough," the Maester whispered. Thunder boomed overhead, not thunder but the shudder of gates as they swung closed. Winterfell had faced ironborn raiders and northern storms. Never this. Jaime looked at Jon Snow, meeting his grim gaze. "We fight tonight," he said. Jon nodded. "And if we fall, then we fall as one," Jaime finished. He turned to the lords. "Every hearth must burn. Rip down tables, benches, doors, anything that feeds flame. Archers to the towers with dragon glass, spears at the gates, and when the dead breach, put torch to them." Men scattered. Bells clanged warning. Atop the ramparts, horns blew a mournful dirge that carried across white fields already crawling with distant shapes. Within the hour, Winterfell blazed like a beacon. Fires leapt from cauldrons along the walls. Moat oil shimmered ominously. The scent of smoke and pine tar burned the back of Jaime's throat. Even the snow seemed to glow, lit from below by orange half-light. The dead came. They came in silence broken only by the crunch of ice beneath countless feet. Their eyes shone like cold fire, spears of frozen bone brandished in skeletal hands. And behind them, towering pale riders upon steeds whose breath smoked black, came the others, tall, regal, terrible. "Loose!" Robb shouted. Arrows screamed skyward, their tips glittering. A volley of dragonglass rained upon the horde. Where shafts struck, corpses shattered in puffs of frost. But the wave advanced, relentless. Pitch cascaded from murder holes. Torches followed, igniting a flaming trench. Corpses stumbled into fire, shrieking. Yet their fellows clambered atop charred remains, extinguishing flame beneath numbers. Jaime fought upon the battlement, sword and torch paired. Beside him Jon Snow wielded Longclaw, Valyrian steel singing as it hissed through frozen sinew. Deerwolves howled within the walls, echoing the roar of flames. Somewhere, Lady Mage Mormont bellowed orders. Theon loosed shafts grimly. Sir Roderick's greatsword rose and fell like a metronome of death. Still, the dead climbed. A wight reached the crenellation, jaw hanging by threads. Jaime thrust torch between its jaws. Flame burst from empty sockets as it toppled screaming. But another replaced it, and another, until the parapets crawled with clawing hands. A piercing shriek split the night. Jaime looked skyward. Above the wall of flame, an other advanced, icy sword gleaming. It vaulted effortlessly, landing upon the rampart before him. The air around it froze, torchlight guttered. Blue eyes fixed on Jaime, ancient and pitiless. He raised his longsword. Steel met crystal. The impact rang like breaking bells. Frost crept along the blade, biting flesh. Jaime grimaced, forced strength into his arm. The other moved gracefully, each stroke precise as artisanship. Jaime parried, riposted, but his blade chipped under the unnatural chill. Jon Snow appeared, eyes blazing, Valyrian steel humming. He leapt between them, Longclaw carving an arc that met the icy sword in a flash of blue fire. The other recoiled. Its weapon cracked, fracturing like thin glass. Jon pressed, roar tearing from his throat, and Longclaw cleaved through pale armor. The other erupted in shards of frost, wind whipping them away. Breathless, Jaime clasped Jon's shoulder. "Well struck." "No time," Jon gasped. And indeed, the wall still writhed with undead forms. Hours blurred into a single endless heartbeat of steel and flame. At last, Pre-dawn light seeped over the horizon, a weak glow staining gray clouds pink. The dead faltered, as though the sun itself were a blade leveled against them. They retreated, not in disorder but in chilling unison, turning north towards snow-swallowed fields. In their wake lay Winterfell's shattered gate strewn with ash and ruin, and the living who still breathed. Exhaustion weighted every limb. Fires smoldered low. Wounded moaned. Yet when Robb Stark raised his sword, a ragged cheer answered, thin but defiant. Winterfell had held. Jaime leaned upon the battlement, chest heaving. The sky brightened to bruised lavender. He thought of Cersei far away, of a kingdom tearing itself apart over crowns and pride. Let them squabble, he thought with weary wonder. Here was the true war, a war against death itself. Jon Snow joined him, eyes rimmed red. They stood in silence, watching the dead retreat beyond sight. It will not be the last night, Jon said. No, Jaime agreed. But we have seen dawn. That is something. Behind them, the yard teemed with survivors tending wounded, stoking fresh fires. Catelyn Stark walked among them, offering water, offering courage. Somewhere Bran dreamed of wolves. And in Jaime's heart, something long frozen cracked, letting in the faintest glimmer of light. He turned toward the rising sun. And for the first time in many years, the Kingslayer allowed himself to hope. Yao. Ke-ga. Moonset left the sky ink black, flecked with embers where stars pierced the veil. Jaime stood upon the ruined gatehouse and listened to hammers ring somewhere in the yard. Every blow a promise Winterfell would rise again before darkness returned. Fires guttered low in braziers all along the ramparts. Sparks drifted upward, bright as scattered seeds. He rubbed soot from his cheek with a gauntleted thumb and watched the ashes swirl, wondering whether a man could be remade as quickly as stone and timber. Below, healers moved among rows of pallets laid end to end on the fresh shoveled snow. The wounded groaned or slept, or stared in hollow silence at the pale dawn. Steam rose from cauldrons of pine resin water, where arrowheads of dragonglass were boiled clean before reuse. The tang of burnt flesh clung to everything, thick enough to taste. Somewhere a babe cried. Somewhere a direwolf answered with a weary yowl, as if reminding all present the living still kept faith with living things. Robb Stark strode from the smithy trailed by Hallis Mullen, shoulders dusted white from ashfall. His cheeks were drawn, his eyes rimmed by the sleepless red rings of command, yet steel lay beneath that fatigue. Steel and something bright as tempered hope. We meet in the great hall, he called to Jaime. An hour to see who remains fit for council. Jaime nodded, turned back to the field. Carts already carried corpses toward the Godswood, where a fresh pyre was being raised beneath the heart tree's bleeding mouth. They would burn their own before nightfall. The dead they had slain, those charred remnants that could be dragged, were heaped beyond the eastern gate in a growing mound of blackened bone. Twice the corpse pile had begun to twitch after flames died. Twice torches found fresh oil. No eyes of glacier blue stared from that cairn now, but no one trusted it to stay still. Ser Jaime. Jon Snow's voice broke his reverie. The young man approached with long claw sheathed at his side and frost still crusting the fur of his cloak. A smear of dried blood, someone else, darkened his jaw. Jon. Jaime inclined his head. You should rest. I will when they do. Jon gestured toward the columns of smoke. Lord Commander Mormont's raven reached us an hour before the fight. The watch holds, for now. But Shadow Tower and Eastwatch have each lost patrols. White Harbor reports whites washing up on the tide, as if they walked the seabed southward. Naderbo. Jaime's gaze drifted east, where a sliver of the shivering sea gleamed beyond low hills. Salt does not trouble them, he murmured. Cold is merely their breath. Jon's lips pressed thin. If they can cross water, the islands are lost next. The Ironborn may at last meet foes they cannot outreave, Jaime said, earning a flicker of grim amusement. They descended the stairs together, stepping around shattered merlons and patches where frost still hissed against lingering coals. Along the way, Jon asked, quieter than before, "You saw the other fall to Valyrian steel. Does your sword bear the same alloy?" Castle forged only. Jaime tapped the scabbard at his waist. I once wielded Valyrian when I guarded Eris. A blade named Brightroar, lost with my grandsire in Valyria. My father never cared to replace it. Joan's eyes traveled to the ordinary steel. We have but 2 such blades in the castle. Ice now broken and carted south, and Longclaw here, not enough. No, Jaime agreed. Which means we find other weapons, or we forge alliances strong enough to buy us time. He thought of Tyrion behind the Red Keep's walls, juggling vipers with wine-stained fingers. And we pray those who hold the forges of Dragonfire remember the north before the south devours itself. The great hall smelled of damp wool, boiled oats, and blood. Benches had been cleared from the center to leave space for a splintered war table dragged in from the solar. Robb stood at its head, Catelyn at his right. Maester Luwin leaned on an ironwood staff, his links clinking with each breath. Lords Karstark, Glover, and Tallheart sat and stood as their wounds allowed. Lady Maege Mormont occupied a chair hacked from a broken ox cart, one arm slung but her voice unbowed. Theon Greyjoy, missing a chunk of ragged ear now, lounged at the map's edge, pretending to polish a dirk while his eyes hunted for approval. When Jaime and Jon entered, conversation dulled, but only for a moment. War left little room for old scorn. Robb waited until the hall doors thudded shut. A.T. Sunset the Dead withdrew beyond bowshot. Scouts report they camp still beyond the King's Road. Silent. No fires, no cookpots. They do not eat or sleep. Some simply stop, staring at Winterfell, as though the castle were a memory they mean to possess. Memezerwan. Lord Rickard Karstark tugged his gray beard. They will attack again tonight. Lady Mormont growled. And again the night after, until we tire quicker than they. Jaime studied the map. Pins marked towers, stockades, hamlets. Every river crossing south of the wall seemed suddenly too near. They retreated at sunrise. If we meet them midday on open ground, under sun, we fight whites only, not walkers. Namiman. The sun means little this far north by autumn, Maester Luwin warned. Twilight lingers, and clouds. Then our answer is fire, Jaime pressed. More than pitch, wildfire, if any remains in these lands. Robb frowned. Wildfire is a southern art. And a perilous one, Catelyn added, recalling her husband's tales of mad dragons in human skin. Jaime remembered green plumes, swallowing whole ranks outside kings, landing in Robert's rebellion. Perilous, yes, but the dead know no fear. We must borrow dread on our behalf. Medicine style. It would need fetching. Jon laid a finger on a painted coastline. The pyromancers keep their vaults beneath the city now ruled by Queen Regent Cersei, Theon said with a sly twist of lips. She is unlikely to ship her powder north when her own throne sways. Jaime ignored the barb. Tyrion rules in her stead. My brother may listen to reason, if persuaded the threat is real. Karstark snorted. You would parley with kin while ours rot on pyres? Jon's retort came swift. We fight for the living, my lord. Lions or wolves, all breathe alike. Silence snapped tight until Robb spoke. A messenger must go south, but go lightly, 2 riders fleet and unknown to wary eyes. Meanwhile, we hold the castle. I will ride, Jaime said. Alone I may pass the neck faster than a pair. I have traveled these roads with fewer friends. I won't let you, Robb answered, quick as drawn steel. Your sword is needed here, and the south is full of ears that will close to Stark pleas, Jaime countered. He met Catelyn's gaze, asked silently for judgment. At last she spoke. You seek wildfire to save our sons. Her voice carried through the hall. Then prove it with more than words. Take a Stark with you. No hostage, a witness. Jon straightened. I will go. Robb spun. You are needed. I have sworn no banners, Jon reminded. The Night's Watch forbids blood feuds. Let me carry the wall's warning to King's Landing. Lady Mormont nodded approval. Others grudgingly followed. Robb rubbed weary eyes. So be it. Sir Jaime, Jon Snow, you ride at dusk. Take the swiftest mounts, wear no sigils. Avoid the King's Road until Queen's Crown. Raven us from Moat Cailin if you pass. Nedapini. Their escort would be small. Pip and Gren from the Watch, still hail. 6 northern scouts wearing green cloaks mottled like summer woods. Maester Luwin's youngest acolyte. Benjen, slight and silent but a gifted raven handler. Those appointed set about readying tack, packing salted venison, stripping armor to lighter leathers. Jaime visited the forge, begged Mikken for a block of northern steel he might shape on southern roads. Mikken grunted, handed him a short cutlass as down payment. It won't sing like Valyrian, but it bites through mail, the smith said, wiping sweat from his eyebrows. Bring back something the world has never seen. Outside, snowflakes large as moths drifted in slow spirals. The dead waited somewhere beyond that white hush, but for the first time since arriving, Winterfell sounded more alive than frightened. Men hammered stakes, women boiled tar, children carried bundles of dry straw in staggering arms. Bran watched from a tower window, eyes unblinking. Arya practiced thrusts in the yard with a broken broomstick, tongue between teeth. Sansa knelt by the weir, whispering prayers older than recorded song. Each in turn met Jaime's eyes, offering not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that he too would risk bone and blood for their sake. He found Cersei in memory while he saddled the gelding named Stormrunner. Her laughter at dusk, her scent of crushed oranges and sin. He wondered if she sensed now that threads tying him to her heart had frayed beyond easy mending. Did she plot his rescue? His death? Or did she, as ever, plot only survival coated in gold? No ravens answered that. Dusk bled in slow threads from the western sky when the gates swung out. Jon rode at Jaime's right, Longclaw wrapped in dark wool. The 9 companions trotted down the drawbridge between rows of men holding torches high, their flames blown sideways by an anxious wind. A last cry of the North remembers floated after them, sharp and defiant, then fortress walls swallowed sound. Forests closed quickly, stark trunks crowding like columns of a frozen cathedral. Hooves made hollow thuds on hard ground. They kept no campfires, drank meltwater in turns, chewed strips of meat until jaw and eyelids felt equally heavy. 2 days they cut cross-country, skirting ice-rimmed tarns and bogs that smoked faintly under morning sun. Ravens flitted overhead in silent knots, as though shepherding them onward. At Grey Waters, Marsh's reeds stood taller than men, rattling like bones when night winds worried their stalks. Pitt muttered the place was haunted. Gren joked marsh ghosts might be easier than sand in Southlands. Jaime said little. He counted heartbeats between rustles, weighing each as possibility of ambush. The neck made cowards bold. Narrow causeways, hidden pools disguised by floating mats, crannogmen masters of spear and frog dart. Twice arrows hissed close, sink into mud with soft clacks. Twice Jon raised open palms and called, "We carry warning from Winterfell to all green men of the waters. Walkers come." Only frogs answered. On the 3rd dawn the mists parted to reveal a low hall rising from tangled brush. Thatch roof grown with moss. Windows shuttered by fish skin membrane. Men in leather vests ringed its perimeter, bows half drawn. Their leader stepped forward, broad of nose and brown of hair. Webbed cloak mottled like lily pads. "Whence ride you?" he asked. "From Winterfell," Jon replied. "We seek Moat Cailin." The crannogmen studied them. "Dead things walk. We've watched them. They drown, but do not stay drowned. Our spears hold, yet they come again when water stills." "You have seen them," Jaime said. "Eh, lion?" The man's eyes flicked to his cloakless shoulders. "We watch all rivers. Tread softly. The neck shrinks when death steps upon it." "None?" He offered eels roasted in brine, refill of water gourds, and directions to dry ground. They pressed on, grateful breaths issuing pale in the clammy air. 2 more days and Moat Cailin's black towers speared the horizon, broken teeth of some long-dead worm. The moat itself lay half-frozen, its causeway a thin ribbon between pools of stagnant, brackish ice. The scouts crossed first, signaling safety. Inside, Pigeons burst from eaves like thrown stones. Benjen released ravens from a mossy rookery tower. Tying to each legs a scroll Lewin had penned in cramped but urgent script. To White Harbor, to Deepwood, to Pike, to Gulltown, they flew. That night they slept among collapsed walls while rain hissed upon coals. Jon tinkered with dragonglass arrowheads, scraping shafts smooth. Jaime sharpened his sword by spent light, though he suspected edges mattered less than fortune these days. "You have changed," Jon said quietly. "Yes, have you? I knew myself a bastard once." Jon continued. "Now I am watcher on the wall, rider to the south, envoy for the living. Names shift quicker than wind." Jaime wiped the blade. "And I who killed a king ride to save a kingdom." Jon looked across the gloom, expression unreadable. "When we reach the Trident, your house's banners may bar the road. Then I will ask politely," Jaime said. "And if that fails, I will ride round. Would you fight them?" Jaime thought of his father's cold eyes, of golden lions snarling on crimson shields. "I would fight for life," he answered at last, "even against lionkin." Jon nodded. "As would I. Against the dire wolf." East of the Green Fork marsh gave way to open meadow, though winter had already gnawed grass pale. They passed burned farmsteads abandoned to crows, a toll of the riverlands caught between Lannister sorties and Tully counter-raids. The air smelled of distant smoke and churned soil, but no hint yet of rotten rime that tracked the undead host. A week out from Moat Cailin, they overtook refugees trundling southward, shivering small folk driving rickety carts loaded with children and cooking pots. Jon dismounted, asked news. A wheezing old man replied, "Things in snow chased us from the weeping water. Dead wives come knock at doors. We flee king's creatures, now flee queer ones too." Jaime handed them a waterskin, pressed 3 silver stags into a splintered palm. Their fear passed contagious down the road. Everywhere they rode, whispers preceded them. Blue-eyed fiends, hosts of ice, wars between kings. Yet none spoke of wildfire nor pyromancer aid. King's Landing seemed a world removed. On the banks of the Red Fork they found the ruins of a recent skirmish. Mailed corpses half scavenged, banners trampled. One standard remained upright, its pole jammed into churned mud. Crimson lion on gold. Jaime halted before it. His gaze drifted over fallen men, Lannister soldiers cut by axes, throats open like split pomegranates. He inhaled, cold weight settling behind ribs. These had been his once, though he had never learned their names. Gren towed a corpse with boot heel. "Bolton work, by the flaying." Jaime nodded at the flayed man scribbled on a discarded shield. "The bastard of Bolton wages his own war while the dead march." Jon spat. "Let him rot. The others will flay him in turn." But Jaime felt no comfort imagining that meeting. Cruelty mirrored made no light. They crossed at Oldstone's under noon sun. The ruins where Jenny of Oldstones once danced now hosted crows and a single carved stone heart, cracked by cold. Jaime rested a hand on its lichen-rough surface, wondering if Jenny still sang in some ghostly hall. Then hoofs pounded upriver, and 3 riders in stark cloaks hailed them. "Moat Cailin Raven found us," their captain called. Robb Stark marches south with 30 banners. King's Landing falls to treachery. Ned Stark sentenced for traitor. The North forsakes the crown. "The Jon's jaw tightened. Jaime's stomach clenched. He pictured Ned kneeling beneath a headsman's sword, saw the man's quiet honor extinguished under red sunrise. "When?" he asked. 10 days passed. The rider's gaze flicked to Jaime. "The Lion Queen claims Joffrey king. Baratheon brothers muster hosts against her." Chaos multiplied faster than plague. Jaime closed his eyes a breath. If Ned Stark lay dead, his own case for trust in King's Landing shrank to a sliver. Yet wildfire remained, or so he prayed. He could no more turn back than outrun winter. They pressed on, leaving the Stark men to ride north with messages of their progress. Past River Run smoking horizon they switched to fresh horses at an abandoned toll house, paying coin no ferryman accepted. By the time King's Landing's walls rose distant and dirty in heat shimmer, they had traded furs for patched cloaks of drab wool. Faces unshaven, postures slouched like sellswords seeking higher. Fires burned within the city even by daylight. Slum blazes, riot pyres, the usual stink amplified by unrest. Gold cloaks at the gates looked harried. Their commander barely glanced at passports Jaime forged on the ride, stamped with sigils of a minor Gulltown house. Once inside, the noise swallowed thought. Fishmongers hollering stale wares, beggars tugging sleeves, priests of the Red God proclaiming light against winter night. Hanging cages above Flea Bottom held rancid heads of traitors, all recent, all grim. An urchin darted past, clutching half-eaten peach. Jaime called him back with a clink of silver. Where keeps one Tyrion Lannister these days? Hand's tower, if his hand, the boy squeaked. Or at Shataya's pink palace if he ain't. A grin split his grime-smeared face. Or under a dog pile of ledgers any hour when wine is low? Jaime flicked the coin. Fetch news of Wildfire, lad, and you'll have another. They made for the Tower of the Hand via narrow backways known from Jaime's Kingsguard years, though alleys now brimmed with hard eyes. Tyrion's steward, a thin man named Jocelyn, barred entry until he recognized the lion at the door. The reunion with Tyrion occurred in a study half submerged under parchment. The dwarf started from his high stool, nearly spilling ink. 7 hells, I thought you dead, he barked. I often am. Jaime clasped his brother's hand. Now I ride for life's sake. Tyrion's gaze flicked to Jon beneath his hood, to Pip and Gren waiting outside. Winter's shadows follow you, I see. Jaime closed the door, stripped off gloves. The dead walk beyond the neck. They attacked Winterfell. We need Wildfire, vats, barrels, whatever you possess. The wall will fail elsewise. Tyrion looked neither shocked nor doubtful, only weary. He poured wine, offered none. Old Archmaester Chelstead studied those tales, said wildfire burns hotter than dragonflame, melts ice like wax. I believed him enough to order new batches after Stannis threatened siege. But Mother seized half to secure the bay. Jon stepped forward. We do not ask. We demand, boy. Tyrion arched brow, then sighed. Forgive me. Tact runs thin as the wine. He rubbed his temples. I will give what I can. 300 jars remain in secret cellars. Another 500 ferment, but are weeks from readiness. We take what's ready, Jaime said. Send with fast wagons to Moat Cailin. Then by barge to White Harbor. Barges risk ironborn raiders. Jon warned. Tyrion snorted. Balon Greyjoy crowns himself king of seaweed. He'd sooner steal gold than jars of green death. You know him, little, Jon muttered. We'll guard the shipment, Jaime cut in. Ravens warned Stark and Arryn fleets to meet us. If they balk at Lannister gift, remind them the gift burns indiscriminately. Tyrion leaned back, studied his brother. You speak with Ned Stark's ghost behind your tongue. He taught with silence. Jaime answered, feeling weight behind his sternum. I listened late, but I listened still. Paperwork came next. Requisitions sealed with hand sigil, orders for Alchemists' Guild, bribes for harbor masters. Tyrion penned in cramped haste. Wax dripped like blood. Over each parchment he murmured, May the Father have mercy, the Mother send mercy, the warrior lend might. Jaime had never known him so devout. Night fell outside, leaded windows. Torches along the street of steel cast sword shadows on cobbles. The city hummed disquiet. Rumors of Renly marching from Highgarden, of Stannis building ships at Dragonstone, of Northmen sharpening axes in Twins Beyond the Twins. When tasks ended, Tyrion poured 3 cups. He offered one to Jon at last. For warmth, he said. Jon sipped reluctantly. Cersei will rage, Tyrion told Jaime. She hoards wildfire to roast Stannis' fleet, not freeze-bitten stories. Let her rage, Jaime said. She has wall enough around her heart to keep warm. Tyrion's eyes darkened. She told father you betrayed House for wolves. He plots to draw you south in chains. I come of my own will, unbound, Jaime replied. Chains rust quick in snow. Jon stroked the wolf head pommel of Longclaw. Chains still bite, he said quietly. 3 dawns later, 9 wagons creaked from King's Landing's mud gate, each barrel swaddled in straw, each driver sworn to silence by purse and threat alike. Tyrion rode with them as far as Rosby, intending audit. Jaime, Jon, and 2 alchemist escorts pressed ahead on fresh mounts bearing letters for Lords Arryn and Manderley. Meet the Lion's Road, guard the flame. Along the Roserad they passed knights gathering for Renly, bright tents, laughter, rose banners fluttering like silk petals in breeze. Jaime counted numbers, saw soft leather, gleaming gold plate, heard pipers fling merry tunes into cold air. None suspected the dirge galloping behind thawing soil. At Bitterbridge they turned northeast, skirting Stormlands fighting. A week of hard travel brought them to Maidenpool, where the tides of war lapped close. Crabbers whispered of pale men crawling from the sea at dusk, cutting nets, dragging fishers under. Jaime paid them for passage on a cog, bound to White Harbor. The captain balked until offered a barrel of Arbor Red, and promise of harbor protection. The voyage north proved mercifully swift. Wind-filled patched sails, gulls circled. No iron-born prow dared approach while Taroshi warships patrolled for sellsword coin. But fear clung to every creak of rope at night. Jon stood stern watch, studying stars between tattered clouds, perhaps hunting solace in constellations named by ancient Starks. On the 15th sunset since King's Landing, the white knife widened to reveal White Harbor's granite jaws. Torches blazed along the breakwater. A northern galley flying Manderley Trident escorted them upriver through ice flow. Fish Castle towers loomed rosy in torch glow. Lord Wyman Manderley, vast but regal, awaited on the quay, in furs trimmed white as sea foam. "Winter's mouth gapes," he greeted. "Feed me news, not platitudes." Jaime bowed stiffly. "We bring wildfire enough to boil the Weirwood Sea. I beg harbor and swift roads north." Negavskal. Wyman's eyes narrowed. Intrigue danced there but also resolve. "The Lannisters play a strange game, Kingslayer." "A game of survival, my lord," Jon said. "No other." Wyman weighed Joan's black cloak, Jaime's worn mail. He nodded. "Then unload. My men will guard. I ride with you to Winterfell. The merman does not hide while wolves and lions bleed." They replenished stores, reshoed horses, rested but one night. On departure, Wyman lined the quay with men-at-arms, each bearing bundles of pitch-soaked reeds. "For your jars," he explained. "Green fire spreads best when guided." They thundered north along the King's Road, wagons jostling. Snow deepened each league. At Queen's Crown, refugees once more choked the roadway, this time accompanied by flayed men nailed to tree trunks, Bolton's warning to deserters. Wyman growled like a bear, ordered them cut down and burned. Their charred forms lit the dusk behind, grim lanterns for a haunted path. By dusk third, they saw a glow ahead, Winterfell's watchfires, taller, fiercer than memory. Horns answered their approach, gates rolled open. Jaime caught his breath. The courtyard swarmed with new tents, siege platforms laden with casks, ballistae greased and pivoting. Above the main keep fluttered banners, half wolf, half crowned stag. He frowned, searching. Robb emerged with Catelyn beside him, a parchment in hand. "Alliance with Lord Renly," he explained, voice tight. "He sends grain and swords by the Rose Road in exchange for pledge of neutrality toward his claim. Stannis offers only fire and faith." Jaime glanced at wildfire wagons. "Fire is what we wield tonight, my lord." He dismounted stiffly. "How fares the wall?" "We hold," Robb said. "Barely. They test us each dusk. Climb faster now. Our archers kill walkers, but their numbers grow." He clasped Jaime's forearms. "You returned, with hope." "Hope burns," Jaime answered. He turned to Catelyn. "My lady, your daughters?" "Safe," she said, eyes shining with unshed tears. "Though Sansa mourns her father, I mourn him as well," Jaime admitted. "And I will avenge him by preserving what he lived for." Night closed, swift, heavy with portent. Under a moon, a sliver thin as broken nail, teams moved barrels onto ramparts. Alchemists in black masks coached soldiers on handling. Strike flint at fuse strings, toss, duck. One jar slipped, shattered, erupted in green hiss that clawed the sky and turned flesh to cinder. Screams chased the blaze. They ended it by shoveling snow, though snow itself caught and burned blue for long moments. No one spoke after that. One misstep shown, each foot set with sacred care. Wyman stationed mummers at gatehouse hoisting nets of clay bombs. Lady Mormont's women daubed spears in oil, set wicks along hafts. Jon and Jaime stood together upon the battlement above the main gate. Beneath their boots lay 4 casks bound by rope, plugs corked, fuses looped round timber braces. Storm clouds banked on the northern horizon, lit from below by unnatural pallor. As though an aurora crawled across frozen scrub, Jaime drew breath, tasted brimstone, pine, past terror. He touched longsword hilt, felt leather warm despite chill. "If I fall," he told Jon, "douse me quick." Jon did not smile. "I would, for any brother." Silence thickened. Then horns, by blasts, shuddered the air. Torches lined the far tree line, blue not red, bobbing like will-o-wisps. A tide of white surged outward, moonlight gleaming on icy helms. At their head, mounted atop a stallion whose mane writhed like smoke, rode a figure taller than any giant, crowned by antlers of frost. Jaime swallowed. "Their king? Or their doom?" Jon whispered. Robb's voice boomed, echoing down stone. "Archers draw." 1,000 bowstrings creaked. Dragonglass arrowheads sipped torch blaze. "Loose." Black feathers blotted stars, fell screaming. In their wake bodies burst like ice sculptures dashed on marble. Yet the tide did not slow. The Pale King raised a hand. Dead branches, half-buried knives, splinters of siege debris rose in mirror. With a gesture he loosed them. A storm of shards hammered the walls, clanging, puncturing hides, snapping necks. Jaime ducked as a splinter rattled past ear. He saw Pip stagger, shaft through thigh. Gren dragged him behind Crenel. The air smelled suddenly of copper. "Now!" Jaime shouted. He lit a fuse, hurled a jar. It arced green, trailing sparks, smashed amid the front rank. Wildfire bloomed, vivid, ravenous, alive. Dead flesh caught, bone armor melted, whites shrieked like furious kettles. Others flinched back from green tongues, licking with spite. More jars lobbed from towers. The night flared unnatural emerald. Snow hissed, boiled. A wave of vapor rolled, reeking of pine tar and rot, but the dead still advanced at flanks where fire burned less fierce. They scuttled up walls heedless of arrows, clawing cracks, lifting each other like ants. Lady Mormont ignited spear nets. Flaming lattice dropped onto climbers, pinning them, roasting. Still they rose. On south parapets, Wyman's men poured pitch, set light, watched a waterfall of flame cascade. The moat shone neon green, reflective as poison glass. Then the Pale King moved. Riders parted. He dismounted in a slow, terrible grace. Sword of purest ice materialized in hand. He strode through wildfire. The green parted around him, hissing but yielding like mist to winter gale. Flames dimmed in his wake, turned blue, then flickered out. Jon saw and leapt the Crenel's lip, dropping to inner ramp, sprinting across yard. Jaime followed, muscles protesting, feet sliding on snowslick. They met the Pale King not 20 paces beyond the first arch. Around them whites boiled over the wall, but Wyman's guard intercepted, axes crunching. The king's eyes blazed azure suns. He lifted sword, pointed at Jon. Jaime stepped between instinctively. Ice kissed steel with shriek. The shock numbed his wrist. Jon circled flank, longclaw flashing. They fought like orbiting moons. Jaime parrying, Jon striking. The king countering with economy so exquisite it seemed to dance. Each contact chilled the air. Frost, spider-webbed swords. Jaime misstepped, boot catching corpse arm. The king's blade slashed breastplate, peeling iron like fruit skin. Heat fled his chest. He gasped, staggered. Jon roared, plunged Longclaw into the king's flank. Blue flame spat. The blade stuck. The king turned, regard as ancient as glaciers, and drove elbow into Jon's gut. Jon flew backward, struck stone, lay heaving. Jaime forced lungs to draw. He seized a fallen torch, its head smoldering orange. The fire seemed pitiful before that icy halo. Still, he advanced. Kingslayer, the dead king hissed. Not with tongue, but with wind passing through empty hollows. Jaime thrust torch toward its face. Flame dimmed, guttered, reignited green where wildfire residue clung to glove. Green raced along cloth, climbed arm. Pain lanced bones. He cast burning gauntlet at the creature. Wildfire splashed across ice armor, eating, crackling. The king shrieked a thin sound of splitting glaciers. Jon scrambled up, yanked Longclaw free, and cleft again across neck. A crack like mountain splitting echoed. The head fell, shattered on stone, disintegrating to snow. Silence rippled outward. Wights faltered, paused mid-climb. Those already inside convulsed, limbs jerking. One by one they collapsed, limbs stiffening where they lay. Outside the walls, the tide stuttered, stumbled, stilled. Frost cloud lifted like sigh. Jaime fell to knees, chest heaving, breastplate steaming from contact of heat and winter. Jon knelt opposite, eyes wide, blade dripping azure ichor that evaporated before it could touch ground. Across the yard, torches slowly brightened. Soldiers raised shouts, incredulous at sudden still. Robb raced down steps, gray wind at heel, took in scene, wordless. It died, Jon panted. We killed it. Perhaps only one, Jaime rasped. He looked at green scars scorching flagstones where wildfire had spattered. But one may suffice this night. Catelyn came, tears streaking soot-marked cheeks. She knelt, seized Jaime's scorched hand. Your arm. No fire without burn, he muttered, wincing as flesh blistered. Maester can salvage what remains. He looked to Jon, to Robb. Saw in their faces a dawning possibility larger than vengeance. Unity. Firelight glinted on broken ice shards where the king had stood. They melted into black water, seeping between stones, gone as quickly as fear could fade. Yet Jaime knew the war not ended, merely paused, as winter itself inhaled, preparing deeper cold. Still, hope stood taller in that yard than any tower. He rose slowly, leaned on Jon, and together they walked toward the keep, past men cheering lion and wolf alike. Within halls, bells tolled not for morning but for dawn. It crept through, arrow slits rosy and fresh, painted wildling spears. Lannister gold, stark gray, all the same pale gold. Jaime let the light warm ruined arm, thought of ashes swirling above Winterfell's walls, of snow still falling over fields beyond, and of a song once sung by a mad king's child about dragons dancing in spring skies. He wondered if somewhere, far to the east, wings beat again. He wondered if, when they finished this war, the world could be taught to breathe fire and frost without destroying itself. For now, there was daylight, and in daylight the living endured. Ganjan. Snow melt trickled through the shattered stones beneath Jaime's boots. A faint rivulet murmuring in the hush after battle, as though the castle itself sighed relief that dawn had survived the night. In the yard, the fires of victory guttered by inches, shedding tongues of emerald, violet, and common gold alike. Each flame found its death in the slurry of ice, ash, and thawing blood. Crows wheeled overhead in squabbling knots, daring nearer with every heartbeat, and somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang. A slow, even cadence that seemed determined to deny fatigue its claim upon mortal limbs. Jaime lingered upon the rampart until the hammer's rhythm found his own pulse, steadying the tremor that still coursed through the burned flesh of his left forearm. Maester Luwin had bound the hand in strips of linen soaked with honey and poppy, but the nerves beneath throbbed like harp strings drawn too tight, and every jolt of wind across raw skin felt as sharp as daggers. The pain was welcome, in its way. It reminded him he was living still, that he had given part of himself to crack the world's oldest frost. Below, Repair crews hauled lengths of oak to wedge the split portcullis upright once more. The chains had frozen at the weakest links, then snapped, scattering iron like spilled dice across the entry tunnel. Now young squires wrangled each link into glowing braziers one by one, reheating, refitting, reforging. It was delicate labor, and yet the boys' eyes burned brighter than the coals. They had seen the dead falter. Hope had become an anvil, and every clang of hammer rang like a vow. Jaime descended narrow stairs, passing Wyman Manderley midway. The lord's face was streaked with soot. He carried a length of parchment clutched in one hand-sized fist. "Dispatches from White Harbor," he rumbled without pausing. "2 grain fleets in harbor, 3 more expected. I'll see them loaded northward by week's turn. You look like charred venison, sir." "I feel the part," Jaime allowed, offering a weary salute with his bandaged limb. Wyman snorted, but the sound possessed more warmth than mockery, and he clomped upward toward the battlements, where he meant to read the missive aloud for all the men to hear, another scrap of cheer to bank against the cold. In the quiet that followed, Jaime reached the courtyard and paused at the pyre ground. Blackened bones still stood where they had fallen, encased by crusts of ember-fused snow. Catelyn Stark knelt there beside the burnt-out figure of a woman. Some fisherwife, perhaps, or a threadbare camp follower. The pyre had equalized titles. She smoothed soot from the skull's broken crown, then bowed her head in silent prayer before rising. Her gaze met Jaime's for a long moment over the field of the dead, and the bleak gratitude in her expression needed no words. He dipped his head and moved on. The great hall had been swept clean of ashes, its banners rehung, its hearth rekindled, but the lingering scent of wildfire lent the air a biting tang, evergreen rot and alchemical smoke alike. Inside, Robb sat hunched at the war table, left arm in a sling, right hand scrawling terse lines upon parchment. Gray wind dozed beneath the bench, ribs lifting slow and even like the bellows of a distant forge that would never cool. Jon Snow paced at the opposite edge, Longclaw propped against the wall, while Arya squared her shoulders near the entryway. A stack of spear shafts balanced across her arms like firewood. "New head counts from the roof sentries," she announced as Jaime crossed the threshold. "Every tower has double watches. Nobody leaves dozing." She offered no courtesy title. Yet there was no scorn in her voice, only the crisp cadence of one accustomed to tasks being seen and answered. She accepted Jaime's nod, pivoted, and strode back out into daylight. Robb did not cease writing, but the ghost of a grin touched the corner of his mouth. "She missed your head by half a hair with a practice spear at dawn. That's the Stark seal of approval, I think." Jaime eased into a chair. "I will polish my reflexes tonight." His gaze dropped to the letters. "You send ravens south?" "Not ravens. Men. The skies belong to winter now, and Bran's birds bring as much risk as reward." Robb finished the line, sprinkled sand, and set the parchment aside. "Glover volunteers to sail for Seaguard, to rally Lannister. The Karstarks march east to reinforce White Harbor. We mean to hold every pass and port from here to the sea until Renly's wheat and your wildfire can feed the wall." Jon leaned over the table, tracing the path from Winterfell to the marshy flats beneath. "The watch reports that Eastwatch still stands, but fewer each dawn. The undead drown themselves at the surf and rise again at low tide, like sails coming around the point." "And the wall?" Jaime asked. Robb sighed. "Holds. But frost climbs its face like ivy. Maester Aemon warns the ice itself may shatter if the magic fails." His good hand closed to a fist. "I will not let my father's realm break while I breathe." The promise felt as heavy as Ned Stark's greatsword once had, and Jaime said nothing. Instead, he turned as Bran was wheeled in by Hodor, the gentle giant's bare feet slapping flagstones. The boy's gray eyes glittered with a brightness older than his years, as though the heart tree sap still bled behind them. "Sir Jaime," Bran greeted. Voice a touch hoarse but steady. "You burned the Night's King." "Perhaps one of his bent kings," Jaime replied. "I doubt the true crown has shown itself. The winds say otherwise." Bran's words hung, half riddle, half omen. Robb's jaw tightened. Joan's gaze flicked toward his brother with something between fear and fierce protectiveness. "The winds," Jaime echoed dryly. "Never mention numbers?" Bran's thin shoulders lifted. "Many. But numbers break when fire meets heart." He tapped a finger upon the knotted grain of the war table. "Hell come again at the first moonless night with all that's left beyond the wall. Your wildfire will not reach us in time. Listen." For a moment silence reigned, broken only by gray wind's faint whine. The hall's hearth spat sparks. One landed upon Bran's blanket and sizzled away. "Then we must go north to meet them," Jon said. His eyes had the hollowness of sleep refused. "We've seen a walker fall. We know frost can die. We ride before the next new moon, strike them where they gather." Robb flinched. "With what host? 2,000 men at most, half wounded." "Numbers won't win," Jon countered. "Weapons will. Begging-glass, Valyrian steel, wildfire. We cannot drag wagons across the lakes of twisted ice," Catelyn interjected, entering from a side door, hands pink from scouring cauldrons. "The path is swamped." "Then we seek a weapon that walks," Bran whispered. His gaze slid to Jaime, a knowing weight in it. "Dragons once guarded men from the dark." The statement thudded in Jaime's chest like a fist. Around the table, everyone stilled. Dragons were bedtime tales for children and tyrants, yet the boy's words carried the gravity of prophetic bone. Robb studied him. "You speak of Daenerys Stormborn. She hatches fire in the east," Bran replied. "Matter of fact, 3 shadows circling a red comet. She has dreamt of the cold and of the lion with a flaming hand." His focus sharpened on Jaime's bandaged arm, and Jaime could not quell the chill that crawled his spine. Jon frowned. "Even if dragons live, they roost across half the world. We need them in weeks, not years. Ships sail faster than ravens this season," Catelyn said softly. "But dragons—" "Renly's men speak of a sell-sail fleet at Storm's End," Jaime recalled. 15 galleys under Lyseni banners. They'd cross the narrow sea before winter clamps. If Stormborn truly rises in Korth or Astapor, Lyseni coin can find her. He rubbed at the throbbing burn through his linen. "Assuming she believes us." Robb raked fingers through auburn hair, eyes stormy. "We barter trust on rumors of wings." "Bran does not speak rumor," Jon insisted, surprising Jaime with his ferocity. "If dragons breathe, we must prove worth. Send envoys? Send our dead king's sword? Send anything that binds fire to frost." "And who would sail on such a quest?" Robb asked. Jaime's answer surprised even him. "I will." Shocked faces swung toward him. He felt the weight of their scrutiny like fresh mail. The Eastern princes distrust Starks. They remember Torrhen's line in Old Valyria more harshly than ours. "A Lannister may hold a different coin in Essos." And, he added wryly, "few in King's Landing will lament my absence." "You are half crippled," Catelyn pointed to his arm. "So was Khal Drogo at his final raid," Jaime said, "and he felled 3 riders before he died." "My sword still swings." Robb exhaled through his nose. "I cannot spare you and Jon both," he said. "If one goes east, the other leads north." Jon met Jaime's gaze across the map. For a heartbeat, the flicker of rivalry. Wolf and lion rose, yet it bled quickly into mutual respect, born of shared battle. Jaime dipped his chin. "My place is north," Jon said. "At the wall, where my vows began." He looked to Bran. "If the moonless night brings ruin, I must stand in its path. And I must seek fire," Jaime finished. So the bargain forged itself in silence. Preparations spooled from that moment like threads caught in a loom. Jeor Mormont dispatched ravens to Eastwatch, ordering a garrison in readiness for Jon's approach, while Robb marshaled whatever riders could walk unaided, forging them into a swift strike host. Lady Mormont handpicked 50 shield maidens to ride at Jon's right. Wyman Manderly pledged a dozen heavy lancers on destriers sturdy enough to plow drifts. The Karstark levies, grim over the memory of their lord's sons slain at the Whispering Wood, offered their axes with a vengeance sharpened to ice. Jaime oversaw the refitting of the fastest cog in Wintertown's docks, an old Ibanese trader, squat and broad-beamed. but rigged for brash seas. He named her Heart's Rest, after the Tarth Keep where he had once gazed upon the sea, a boy of 15, envying birds. The irony tasted bittersweet. Tyrion's remaining wildfire stores, what little could be spared after the siege, were loaded in sealed coffers below deck, signed with sigils of House Stark, and the Night's Watch both, a gesture meant to demonstrate a unity the realm had never known. But wildfire was not the gift he intended for dragons. On a chill dawn, Jaime climbed the broken tower, the very spire Bran had once climbed, and found the boy waiting, hands folded across a laprobe. Between them lay a sheathed dagger of dragonglass, obsidian so dark it seemed to drink the rising light. "It belonged to the children," Bran said. "Lost in the crypts of Winterfell since the days before the wall. My dreams led me." Jaime unsheathed a span of black, so sharp its edge vanished. Only the outline remained. "A dragon's tooth," he murmured. "A gift for the mother of dragons," Bran whispered. "Tell her the Raven's boy sends warning. Fire alone can bind the storm." The weight of destiny settled on Jaime's palm. He bowed low to the boy who had once been his almost victim, and in those gray eyes he felt, inexplicably, absolution. The day the northbound host departed, the chill seemed kinder, as if the mere act of marching had summoned a reluctant sun. Jon rode at its fore on a rangy black courser, cloaked in wolfskin, the white pommel of Longclaw gleaming beneath his gloved hand. Robb clasped his brother's arm before the gates. "Bring them no ground to break," he ordered. "Strike and fade. Hold until we return." "If I fall," Jon said, "burn me." Robb shuddered, then nodded. Catelyn embraced her son, whispered something only he could hear, and then the horns sounded thrice. The gate yawed open. The host poured out, wolves and mermen, bears and Karstarks, shields flashing mottled sigils as they filed into the white plain. At their rear marched ranks of Night's Watch brothers borrowed from Castle Black. Gaunt men, eyes rimmed black as if shadowed by memory. But their steps fell with purpose. Jaime stood quietly beside Robb as the column vanished into blowing snow. Neither spoke until the final standard dipped behind a rise. Grey Wind's whine faded to stillness. "He will hold," Jaime said. "He must," Robb replied. "For if we fail in east or north, there is no second war. Only ending." They turned then toward the docks, where Heart's Rest lay tethered with hemp hawsers, her single mast creaking like a weary spine. Galbart Glover tested rigging tension. Osha the spearwoman, freed from chains and pressed into service by conviction alone, inspected spare sailcloth. A ragged crew of volunteers, smugglers, and half-tamed wildlings waited at the gangplank, some spitting into the icy water, others muttering prayers. At the prow, the stark direwolf standard had been replaced by a banner quartered, the direwolf, the crowned stag, the roaring lion, and the black-winged raven. The sight drew gasps from townsfolk who gathered on the quay. Robb and Catelyn escorted Jaime to the foot of the ramp. Snow gusted round them in pricking swirls. Catelyn pressed upon him a small wooden box bound with iron straps. "I asked Luvan to grind the weirwood seeds from the heart tree," she said. "The sap remembers ancient oaths. Plant them if you reach Valyrian shores. Perhaps the old gods will bear witness there too. Wherever men stand against night, they pray alike." Jaime answered, tucking the box inside his cloak. He gripped Robb's forearm. Lion and wolf again joined. "Hold Winterfell. Go wake dragons," Robb said, the hint of the boy king shining through the general. "And if the world must burn, shape the fire." Jaime nodded. Then he turned, strode up the gangplank, and did not look back until deck boards creaked beneath his feet. From the rail he saw Robb and his mother diminish, snowflakes veiling them as though the land itself claimed their shadows. Heart's Rest drifted from the quay on a sluggish tide. Sail unfurled, catching a sliver of wind that tasted faintly of salt and pine tar. Jaime exhaled as Winterfell receded, towers shrinking into the smear of storm cloud. The castle's broken gate gleamed momentarily with the reflection of sunrise, then vanished behind a curve of frosted riverbank. The ship coiled south along the White Knife. hugging ice-rimed bends while cormorants and ivory gulls kept watch from sandbars. At night, they anchored in quiet coves, using halved hogsheads of ice as makeshift fenders, muffling every clank of chain. Rumor had reached them of Bolton riders prowling the banks, black-hooded like executioners seeking to carve their own dominion from war's ragged spoils. But no pursuit materialized. By the 8th day they passed into the Bight, where jagged pack ice bobbed like prowling sharks. The Ibanez hull groaned in protest. Sailors cursed every ridge that scraped the keel. Yet by dusk, the sea opened wide, the great swells shouldering aside the debris of winter. A cold starscape shimmered overhead, pearled lights unmarred by southern smoke. And Jaime, leaning over the stern rail, felt something loosen inside him, as though the very horizon pried at the guarded doors of his heart. He slept poorly that first night on open water, haunted by dreams of Bran's wide eyes and the icy king's sudden fracture. Green flames licked at the edges of memory, and always, beyond, a woman's laughter, the echo of Circe or perhaps some other queen crowned in fire. He woke before dawn, sweating beneath layers of wool, the bunk's straw mattress rustling as he swung legs to the deck planks. He found Osha on the quarterdeck, hair whipping wild in the wind. She offered no greeting, only pointed east, where a faint red smear stained the horizon. "Fire in the sky," she said. "I've seen it once before, the year the dragons were born, red as the blood of the world." Jaime followed her finger. There, just above the sea rim, a faint streak glowed. Neither comet nor sunrise. It pulsed softly, as though breathing ember. His heart quickened. "Rollar's star, some call it," Osha murmured. "Or the weeping woman. Guides sailors to storms or salvation. Depends which songs you trust." "I trust no songs," Jaime said. "But I'll ride that star to the ends of the world if it leads to dragons." She cracked a grin, jagged as broken shale. "Then let's hope the dragons fancy lions." Storms dogged them down the coast. Off Skagos, a squall hammered the decks, tore the foresail, and nearly carried the cask of dragonglass into the drink. 2 sailors wrestled it back with ropes and curses that salted the wind. Near Eastwatch's southern fringes, a gray seal followed them, its black eyes glinting like onyx. Some muttered it bore a warg's gaze, perhaps even Bran's. Jaime watched the creature for hours from the rail, wondering if the boy reached across waters through beast or dream. At dusk the seal vanished, leaving only a single whiskered hair stuck to a deck beam, wind-whipped and glimmering silver. Past the fingers the seas settled. Glover plotted a more easterly course, skirting the Myrish steppe rather than hugging the Vale's coast, safer from Euron Greyjoy's longships, whose black sails were rumored to prowl the narrow sea. They sighted gulls by the thousand, then deep blue water, unmarred by land. Nights turned warmer. The air carried the briny perfume of blooming sea algae. Jaime shed the heaviest of his cloaks, though the burn on his arm still ached in damp air. A persistent throb to remind him he was no longer north of the neck. One evening, Glover spread charts across a barrel and tapped a finger on a speck labeled Liss. "We'll resupply there, if bribes suffice," he said. "From Liss we hire swift galleasses for the summer sea crossing. The daughters of the demon princes sail faster than these old haulers. Lice is Circe's favored port for pleasure voyages," Jaime noted. "We may find friends or knives." Glover shrugged. "All the same, we require fresh water and rope." Heart's Rest coasted into Lias Lagoon at dawn. Turquoise water-lapping pillars of marble villas, built on rumor and flesh. The dockside reeked of orange blossom and cheap incense. Barefoot courtesans lounged beneath silk awnings, their laughter drifting across channels, while smooth-garbed stevedores eyed the ragtag northern crew. "Got gore." Jaime disembarked with Osha, a single purse of silver stags, and the box of dragonglass dagger tucked in a satchel beneath his cloak. Glover remained aboard, overseeing the transfer of wildfire coffers to shore storage under armed guard. They hired a pair of Lysine oarsmen to ferry them into the maze of canals, past mosaic-pillared rookeries and pleasure barges painted with lewd murals. Jaime kept to the shadows, hood drawn, mindful that a golden beard and green eyes might fetch a price for some bounty-seeking Bravo eager to impress Queen Regent Circe. In an alley of cracked moonstone, they found the brothel of Shira the Blue, whose clientele included half the world's smugglers. Shira herself, an older woman whose once legendary beauty had matured into a stately menace, listened to their request for discreet passage across the summer sea. She drummed long lacquered nails on the cedar desk. "The mother of dragons, is it?" she mused. "Many men seek her, most to bind her or bed her. And you would bring her a trinket of black glass, along with knowledge of an enemy she must one day face." Jaime replied, "She has claimed titles beyond the seas. Breaker of chains, mother of dragons. We ask her to be breaker of winter." Shira's eyes, blue and cunning, flicked to Osha. "And what pays for this venture?" "A promise," Osha said. "When ice drowns the world, Lys will need allies who can still breathe fire." The madam chuckled, a smoke-edged sound. "Promises are worthless until the last coin's spent. But I know a captain. One Quoro Valentine, who fancies wagers on long odds." She scribbled upon wax-sealed parchment. "Show him this token. He'll sail for Astapor or Korth, whichever rumor chases that silver-haired girl this month." She tapped the desk. "But hear me, Lion. Should your worlds fall, don't return. Lys respects winners." Jaime bowed. "We intend to win." Outside, gulls screeched above canal steps. Osha tugged her cloak tight, muttering about Lysine perfumers using powdered bone. They hurried across a bridge, past a trio of Bravosi courtiers trading japes in Nazalhai Valerian, until they reached the harbor district. There, perched like a waiting hawk, loomed a sleek three-masted galleass whose hull shimmered with oil-black lacquer. At the gangplank stood Captain Quoro, resplendent in violet silks and leather tooled with wyverns. His narrow eyes appraised the parchment seal, then traveled to Jaime's bandaged arm. "One burned hand," he said. "The other still pays." Jaime produced a small ruby, part of his last trove of Casterly Rock gemstones. Quoro rolled it across knuckles and smiled. "The wind of dawn departs when the moon is 2 fists high. Destination, Slaver's Bay, by way of Valyrian Strait. Bring only souls who do not weep at smoke. Dragonfire cracks men's courage easier than saltwater storms." "We bring wildfire, not tears," Osha snapped. Quoro laughed. "Same thing if spilled." Within hours, Heart's Rest's coffers were lowered into the Wind of Dawn's hold, triple sealed in tarred canvas. Glover and half the northern crew elected to remain with the patched cog, ferrying staples to White Harbor before winter seas closed entirely. Jaime parted from Glover at the quay. Foreheads pressed briefly, a gesture mirroring wildling farewell. "Bring Manderley's grain to Eastwatch," Jaime urged. "Tell them Dragonwing may follow the wind." Glover grinned through his beard. "If wings fail, you'll still be a story to warm nights. Now go make it a tale worth singing." Wind of Dawn set sail under a half-moon, its deck smelling of spiced wine and the faint sulfur waft of sealed wildfire. Jaime stood at the prow as Lai's marble spires slid astern. Each lantern winked out like extinguished fancies. Beneath a swath of black sky, the red star pulsed, an ember guiding them across endless water. And somewhere across that water, he imagined, a girl with hair the color of moonlit snow lifted her eyes to the same ember and felt its tug. Back in the north, moons waned. Jon Snow's host reached the Shadow Tower's base camp within 6 days of forced march. The wall tower's parapets groaned under drifts, and fires burned day and night, for whites prowled every dark hour. Yet no full force had struck since the death of the Pale King. Rangers whispered among themselves that the enemy gathered strength for a single crushing blow. Jon met with Lord Commander Mormont in the icy antechamber of the mess hall. Frozen drips ticked from rafters overhead. A kettle hissed where snow melted over coals. Mormont eyed the young man who had left Winterfell a bastard and returned commanding a coalition of North Realm houses. "You've grown into your name," the old bear said. "Now prove the weight is yours. How do we break them?" "Nano." Jon laid his gauntleted hands upon the frost-laced table. "We will ride beyond the gorge, strike their marshalling ground, draw their hosts north of the Milkwater. But not with cavalry, they'll hear hooves. We need silence. A foot raid, Mormont grunted. We'd lose half to cold before swords crossed. We take the dire wolves, Jon said. Grey Wind leads, the Mormont's bears trail flank, wildling warg scout. We move at dusk, cloaked in skins reeking of carrion, spray ourselves with walrus oil to mask heat. A mad plan, Mormont observed. Madness is all we hold, Jon answered. The wall will not stand another moon. The ice fissures where the spells fail. If we cut out their heart before it grows another king, perhaps we buy time for dragons, or for dawn. Across the room, Mage Mormont slapped her shield. The bear likes this. So the War Council forged a midnight assault, unlike any sung by bards. They whittled spear tips of dragonglass, lashed them to short poles for close work. They packed torches swaddled in tar-dipped linen, to be lit only at the killing ground. And they soaked wolf and bear hides in rancid fat, to blot human scent. On the eve of departure, Jon stood alone on the wall's crest. The aurora danced green and violet across polar skies, and through its shimmer he thought he saw shapes, great wings unfurling, eyes of molten gold peering down. He recalled Bran's prophecy of dragons answering frost. Somewhere, far south, Jaime sailed through night, his own path guided by a star, neither wholly red nor wholly kind. Jon closed his eyes, murmured an old prayer Maester Aemon had taught him, one naming every first man and Andal king who had fallen defending life. He added Ned Stark, then Robb, still living but treading the same path, then Jaime Lannister, lion in wolf skin. He prayed the gods of snow and of fire heard at least one name. When morning came, none recalled the dawn, for a cloud bank rolled in, smothering the sun before it breached the horizon. Across that colorless sky crept a darkness deeper than storm, a wall of roiling shadow, shot through with glimmers of frostbite blue. Watchmen on the south-facing rampart stared, uncomprehending. But Bran Stark, 500 leagues south in his tower room, felt the chill. His eyes opened white and sightless, yet across a tapestry of roots and ravens, he watched the shadow march. He saw Jon at the head of his silent host, slipping into pines, and he saw above them the other's new champion unfurl. Taller than the king they had slain, crown of jagged ice spires that scraped the lowering sky. And Bran, bound to wheels and blankets, began to sing. Not a song of cradle rhymes, but a chant older than men, a low monotone that vibrated in stone and sap alike. In the yard below, every direwolf lifted muzzle and howled. Ravens beat wings from the rookery, swirling in black drifts above the broken tower, and even the flames in the forges stuttered as if reaching to listen. Catelyn Stark heard her sons chant through corridor walls. She climbed the steps at a run, skirts catching on nails. She found Bran with eyes rolled back, breath misting in rapid bursts. His voice wove through languages she had never heard. A patchwork of Skagos cant, children's forest whispers, Valyrian sing-song. She clasped his hand, but his skin felt far away, as though he spoke through a shell left behind. Beyond those stone walls, Winterfell readied for siege anew, even as its greatest hope sailed southward, seeking fire to answer dark. Wind of dawn cut through the narrow sea, skirting Tyroja's perfumed harbors. By day, the crew sighted Valyrian islands, half shrouded in steaming mists, where ghosts of seahorses flickered at the shoals. At night, luminous plankton trailed their wake like stars gleaming beneath the waveskin. Jaime spent long hours leaning at the rail, the dragonglass dagger heavy at his belt, its obsidian edge humming faintly whenever the red star brightened overhead. One moonless night, he dreamed. In that dream, he stood on a road of black stone that pulsed beneath his feet, like a twin heart. Ahead, 3 dragons circled a tower of smooth glass, while at its base, a woman with silver hair knelt, cupping a flame that danced blue and white. She raised her eyes to him and spoke in words he could not hear, but he felt them inside his chest. A question, an invitation, perhaps a warning. Then the dream dissolved, and he woke to salt spray and dawnlight bleeding across a foreign sky. Quarro called from the quarterdeck. Landfall within 2 days. His tattooed arms pointed toward the sun's rising. Far beneath lay the smudge of a distant coastline, green, jagged, and unreal in the morning glow. Astapor. The Red City. Jaime felt the dagger pulse once more, as though impatient. He gripped the rail until knuckles whitened. The burn on his arm throbbed in answer. 2 days later, Wind of Dawn anchored off a crescent beach north of the city walls, far enough to evade the slaver patrol triremes. Jaime went ashore with Osha and 12 Lycene Marines, leaving Wildfire sealed aboard under Quaro's guns. They trekked south through dunes where bleached bones surfaced like fleas, until red brick harems and the pink harpy standard flapped overhead. There, in a soak crowded with Yunkish merchants and dusty pilgrims, Jaime heard the first rumor. She's gone. Dragons flew at midnight, and the city burned behind. Dunno. The tale spilled from the cracked lips of a slave boy begging water. Osha poured a skin. The child gulped, coughed, gasped, then continued. Khaleesi set the unsullied free. She marched east with armies and 3 monsters of wing and flame. The pyramid smolders still. Go look. Indeed. Black smoke coiled above rooftops as though the very bricks exhaled char. Jaime and his party skirted the main gate, wary of chain gangs now unshackled and roving in vengeful mobs. Word came in fragments. Daenerys Targaryen had loosed dragonfire upon the slaver lords, executed the wise masters, and marched along the Skahazadon toward Meereen, gathering freedmen as a rising tide. Jaime cursed softly. Meereen lay leagues deeper into Slaver's Bay, valuable time lost. Yet the path remained clear. Follow the footprints of emancipation until they caught the queen herself. They resupplied water skins at a cistern, left coin that had once belonged to Cersei's secret purse, and turned east. The green hinterlands of Astapor surrendered to blighted plains where battle had recently raged. Burned wagons littered causeways. Charred slave collars hung from tree limbs as gruesome trophies. But wherever the harpy standard lay shattered, curious shoots of civic order sprouted. Roadside clinics staffed by Giscari women, mess tents distributing porridge to ragged men and children who spoke of dragons with awe rather than fear. At Jizar, a fishing hamlet freshly renamed New Hope by its liberated inhabitants, Jaime learned Daenerys was less than a day's march ahead. He pressed on through the night, guided by the red star that loomed like an unfathomable beacon, its glow mirrored in shallow salt pans dotting the terrain. Just before dawn, they crested a ridge and beheld a sight that froze lungs mid-breath, a vast encampment of tattered banners and makeshift fire pits spreading between river curves. 20,000 at least, drawn from every tribe and creed of Essos. Above them, a dragon circled, wings beating like the sails of a burning ship. As it passed across the rising sun, its underside shimmered translucent gold. Jaime felt tears prick unbidden. The creature's magnificence swallowed all fear, leaving only humility. Trumpet calls echoed as they approached. 2 Unsullied emerged from pickets, immaculate despite the dust, spears held with lethal elegance. Jaime raised empty palms, Osha following suit. "We come to treat with Daenerys Stormborn on behalf of Winterfell and the Wall," he said in Valyrian learned from childhood tutors. One soldier replied in clipped idiom, "Queen receives no crown seekers before midday meal." Jaime drew from his satchel the dragonglass dagger, its black sheen swallowing dawn. The Unsullied's eyes widened fractionally. A rare breach of stoic mask. "Gift for the Dragon Queen," Jaime said. "Forged before the wall was built." The soldier motioned, and they were escorted through winding lanes of tents where freedmen cooked breakfast, singing songs in a dozen dialects. Children trailed after, pointing at Jaime's lion-head pauldron and Asha's bone-handled spear. Beyond a cluster of yurts draped in Dothraki leather, stood a pavilion of pale silk and crimson trim. The Queen's audience tent. They were ushered inside. The scent of roasted lamb mingled with sweet green tea. At the far end, seated upon a simple camp stool, Daenerys Targaryen greeted them. A slight young woman, clad in riding leathers, silver blonde hair braided with 3 tiny rubies shaped like dragon eyes. She radiated a softness belied by posture, a steel straightness that matched Valyrian blades. "Travelers from Westeros," she said, English tinted by a Sosi accent. "You bring an odd banner. Wolf, lion, raven, and stag, Jaime said, kneeling. Osha followed, though her scowl suggested distaste for kneeling. Jaime held the dagger forth. From Bran Stark and the living north, a token older than iron, carved of dragon glass. The only true bane to the others who march from eternal winter. Daenerys accepted the weapon. Obsidian fingers caught candle glow, flickering like smoke within stone. Her violet eyes widened. "My children's eggs were carved of this stone," she murmured. Sharp edges that cut flesh deeper than steel. She looked to Jaime. Recognition dawned. "You are Jaime Lannister, once King's Guard to a mad king, my father." The tent chilled despite the rising sun. Jaime bowed his head. "Guilty, your grace. I slew the king I was sworn to protect, because he meant to burn his city and all souls within. I make no plea but this: winter's death rides south. If we quarrel over thrones, none will remain to seat us." "Kneel." Daenerys studied him. "Why come now, Lion of Casterly Rock, after your kin broke my house?" "Because I learned honor at Winterfell's hearth," Jaime answered. He unwrapped the bandage halfway, revealing charred flesh where wildfire had chewed. "And I learned cost upon this skin. I beg your fire for a war beyond crowns." Osha stepped forward. "Dragons crack ice. Wolves will bleed beside them. Decide fast, Khaleesi. Night gathers while south squabbles." "Neniperauti dantum." A hush filled the tent. One of Daenerys' dragons, Drogon, Jaime guessed, by the black scales glimpsed outside, roared beyond the canvas, as if adding his own vote. The queen stood. "I swore to break chains," she said. "And winter's shadow is the longest chain of all, binding life to silence. I will cross the narrow sea in strength." She ran a thumb along the dagger's edge. A bead of blood welled, bright and startling. She studied it, then nodded as though to herself. "But I demand one pledge: that the lords of Westeros bend knee to the realm of the living first, and afterward we speak of iron thrones." Jaime felt a wash of relief. "They will bend," he said, knowing the words were no mere boast, but a promise he would carve into stone. "The North fights already. The Reach, the Vale." "Save speeches," Osha muttered. "Load ships." Daenerys smiled, faint but fierce. A woman of few words and sharp truth. She turned to a scribe. "Send ravens to Lys, Volantis, Pentos. Hire their fastest blackwater hulks. We sail for Dragonstone within the fortnight." Her gaze returned to Jaime. "Your wildfire may light our path." "It is yours," Jaime answered. Thus it was that the lion won a dragon's ear. Word outran wings. Within 10 days, ravens bearing the four-quartered banner soared from Astapor's ruins to Storm's End, Old Town, Gulltown, and to Winterfell, where Bran listened with eyes of clouded moonstone. On the 12th day, as Jon Snow's raiders crouched in pines near the Milkwater Ford, a single raven lighted on his gauntlet. Its message: "Fire marches to sea." Jon glanced skyward. Snow fell in lazy flakes, as broad as coins. He tucked the parchment into his jerkin, signaled silent orders down the line, and slipped through frosted underbrush. Ahead, where the forest thinned into a frozen fen, blue torches glimmered. A legion of the dead arrayed for some unholy rite. In their midst towered the new Ice King, crown of spires haloed in eerie glow. Beside Jon, Lady Mage grinned, teeth white against her painted cheeks. "Fire marches," she whispered. "So we must keep the door open." They hefted dragon-glass spears, ready to crack the hinge. And somewhere over the summer sea, Daenerys Stormborn mounted Drogon under a sky alive with comet fire. Her new fleet sails billowing black and crimson. On a deck behind her, Jaime leaned on the rail, the wind peeling at his golden hair. The burn on his arm flared, but he welcomed the pain. It told him the journey remained unfinished, and in its ache he felt alive, fiercely, dangerously alive. Dragons screamed overhead. The east wind answered. From far north a wolf howled, echoed by a bear, and under the whirling stars an era turned, fragile as glass yet bright with possibility. The narrative of 7 kingdoms reforged by a single impossible alliance. Lion, wolf, and dragon united beneath a sky poised between flame and snow. And the world, holding its breath, trembled on the cusp of a dawn that might finally outshine the longest night. Aka. Snow sighed beneath Jon's boots, each step a muffled heartbeat in the hush before slaughter. The pine forest smelled of resin and frost-bitten sap. In its latticed darkness, 50 Mormont women crouched like brindled cats, axes wrapped in rags to quiet their weight. Between the trunks prowled gray wind and 3 lesser direwolves, muzzles gleaming with rime, their eyes lanterns of restless gold. Farther back, hidden among root-broken gullies, Karstark archers lay prone, white cloaks dusted to invisibility beneath fresh powder. Jon lifted a gloved hand, the column stilled. Across the frozen fen the enemy's torches moved, points of azure flame that gave no heat, drifting through ranks of silent corpses like fireflies trapped under ice. He scrutinized the formation. A wedge 1,000 deep at least, spears of frozen bone jutting from the first 5 files, then ranks of disjointed wildling dead, Northmen, free folk, and pink-faced children in torn Night's Watch blacks. Behind them loomed the new crown-bearer, taller than any man Jon had seen, its armor translucent as frost on winter glass. 9 lesser others ringed it in a perfect circle. Hostly honor guard, and against their collective cold even distance felt painful, as though breath crystallized inside the lungs. The sight curled Jon's stomach, yet a fierce clarity settled over him, sharpening every sound. The faint rasp of Mage Mormont's steady breathing, the creak of leather, the brittle crack of a snow-laden twig surrendering to weight. He turned, touched 2 fingers to the wolf skin collar at his throat. Signal enough. A shadow detached from a birch trunk, Tormund Giantsbane, cheeks painted with soot and whale fat, blue eyes glittering like chips of northern sky. The Free Folk's raiding party waited 300 paces to the west, ready to strike the enemy's rear the moment Jon's torch rose. Beyond them, hidden within the shallow gorge of the Milkwater's winter bed, Manderley's heavy lancers shifted restlessly, horses muffled to near silence with canvas over hooves. It was a desperate plan. A hammer blow of flame and dragonglass meant to crack the cold host and shatter their king before he reached the wall. Jon rested a gauntleted hand on Longclaw's pommel, drawing a breath that stabbed his ribs with frozen iron. The parchment from Jaime rested between wool and mail at his breast, the words etched forever in his mind. Fire marches to sea. Hold. Die. It was both promise and command, but promises were fragile things, easily crushed beneath undead feet, and commands carried weight only so long as men remained living to obey them. In that instant, Jon found himself praying not to the 7 or the old gods, but to the great winged silhouettes now rumored to cross the summer sea. Let dragons be real. Let Jaime keep his oath. Let Bran's visions bind the gaps between these fragile fronts of courage. A soft crunch. Lady Mage had stepped to his side, the ends of her bear paw cloak brushing snow. "Wolf boy," she murmured. "Show him the fang." He nodded. A spark flared as he struck flint to dragonglass fibers, soaked in pine oil. The dull ember blossomed into a guttering flame cupped within his palms. Its glow cast orange across the underside of pine boughs, painting the Mormont chief's face with hellish warmth. Jon breathed once, twice, then thrust the torch skyward. Gray wind howled, a deep, rolling cry that seemed to shake starlight from the heavens. The forest erupted. Karstark arrows hissed overhead, their barbs of black glass whistling like hornets. 200 shafts met the undead front, exploding skulls and frosty clouds. Bodies toppled, but those behind clambered over the fallen without pause. From the west, Tormund's free folk charged, ululating battle cries, slinging clay jars of pitch afire. When they shattered on spindly rib cages, living flame wrapped the dead in roiling tongues. For a heartbeat, the entire swamp glittered green and gold. Then the Frost King raised a hand, and the burning corpses stiffened mid-jerk, flame smothered by a sudden wave of cold that rippled outward from his figure. They fell still, steaming, extinguished. A roar answered. Horses surging from the frozen riverbed, manderly banners streaming. Heavy hooves crushed brittle reed and ice alike as the lancers crashed into the stunned flank. Lady May's shield maidens burst from the trees in tight wedge, axes igniting where oil-soaked wicks met steel. They hacked through the first lines of whites with feral precision. Jon dove into the breach behind them, long claw a silver arc shearing necks and clavicles. Each stroke sang with the faint hum only Valyrian steel could make, a subtle chord that rose above the shrieks of dying dead. Grey Wind lunged past, jaws closing around a thigh. He yanked the corpse from its fellows and shook until head separated from torso. Northerners pressed, each clutching dragonglass daggers or pikes. The gap widened, but so did the chill. An ache that passed through leather and mail into bone, dragging at tendons, slowing limbs. Jon felt the Frost King's gaze settle on him, a palpable weight. Blue fire burned in the creature's eyes, inhuman and ancient. It advanced, phalanx of others gliding at its side. Ice swords drawn. Wherever their blades passed, Karstark arrows burst into crystal shards before striking. Torches! Jon shouted. Flames leapt from Ormond axes. Set reeds alight. Thick smoke coiled upward, darkening the pre-dawn sky. The blue torches of the dead flickered, disoriented by swirling soot. Yet the Frost King's advance did not falter. It moved like flowing water, silent, unstoppable. Manderly's cavalry wheeled, spears leveled for one decisive charge aimed at the king's circle. The horses screamed as a gust of wind knifed through the battle, freezing breath in their nostrils. Hooves skidded on sudden frost. Momentum faltered. That instant cost them. 5 others stepped forward, swords flashing. Ice met steel. Steel shattered. Men toppled amid their mounts, blood splattering scarlet on shining snow. Jon bounded over a fallen mare, met the first of the ring, an other with long hair floating like silver willow strands in a winter stream. It swung. He parried, long claw sparking cold blue. The vibration numbed his arm to the elbow, but he pivoted, slashed back. Valyrian sheared through wrist. The creature's hand and sword clattered into frost and shattered. With a hiss like ice fracturing, it dissolved to glassy fragments. Before he could breathe, another replaced it. Jon ducked, letting Frostblade whistle overhead. He thrust upward, skewering deep through its ribs. Cracks spider-webbed. It burst like brittle porcelain. He backed a step, breath ragged. The Frost King now stood only 20 paces away, its towering form radiant with sub-zero light. A stillness fell, as though even the raging battle beyond the fen momentarily hushed. Jon and the king regarded each other across ankle-deep snow, stained with swirling black blood that steamed faintly. He knew the plan. Strike, destroy the king, break the bond that animated its army. But he was alone now. Maeg's wedge had been forced back by waves of whites. Even Grey Wind fought yards behind, snarling around 3 skeletal foes. 10 heartbeats passed. Each pulled the world tighter until the distance between them felt like the only space left in creation, the past and future trembling on its edge. A scream tore across the sky. Both turned upward. High above, the aurora split as a body cut through cloud layers. A shape vast as a warship, wings blacker than the new moon, trailing sparks where it pierced the frigid air. Dragons. Yet more than dragons, behind the first descended 2 others, one bronze, one green, each exhaling incandescent clouds that roiled into burning spheres before dispersing. Their arrival cracked the dawn. The horizon blazed, searing away shadows. The Frost King recoiled, as though sensing an ancient anathema. Its crown of spires pulsed. A spear of condensed ice flickered into being in its hand. It hurled the weapon skyward. The spear whistled, trailing shards. A bolt of night-black cold aimed at the lead dragon. The beast banked, but not fully. The spear clipped the trailing edge of the left wing. Scales shattered like onyx. A spray of blue-white crystal spiraled behind. The dragon dipped, regained stability, and from its maw a torrent of emerald fire descended. Green wildfire. Jaime's gift unleashed. Flames struck the ground between Jon and the king, vaporizing snow, earth, bodies, air. A shockwave hammered Jon backward. Heat punched through leather, seared exposed skin. He tumbled, rolled into a depression carved by earlier fighting, snow quenching the scorch on his collar. When he staggered upright, blinking tears, the fen had transformed into a cauldron of roiling emerald. Whites within 50 yards writhed the light, their shrieks swallowed by crackling flame. Beyond the wall of fire, silhouettes of others flickered, some stumbling, some discorporating into shards. But in the inferno's unburned center, the Frost King still stood, steam coiling around its figure like a serpent of the void. Its armor, once clear as glass, now clouded with 1,000 hairline cracks. Its gaze smoldered brighter. Jon lurched forward. An aisle of dying flame parted before him, drawn inward as though the king's chill gravity drank heat. He sprinted, swinging Longclaw in twin-handed grip. The king raised a sword, wrought of the purest night. Steel met ice. Shock lanced Jon's shoulders. He drove left foot, pivoted, parried a back cut, riposted with a downward stroke that rattled his lungs. The mismatched blades screamed contact arcs, sending sparks of white fire into the sub-zero air. Each impact fractured the king's sword a fraction more. Each also chipped Longclaw, flecks of Valyrian steel wheeling away like meteor shavings. Jon felt something deep inside the sword, some ancient forging magic, groan under the impossible strain. Then the king seized his throat with its free hand. Agony bit. Jon's breath froze mid-gulp. He saw the blue inferno in its eyes reflect infinite winter and himself. Small, dying inside it. From the edge of vision, Mage roared, axes whirling. She was too far. Gray wind lunged, but whites dragged the wolf down. There was no one else. Jon's world tunneled. A shrill cry split the haze. No beast, but a horn. A wildling horn. A second later, two gnats infused with dragonglass weights sailed over the flames, cast by Giantsbane's raiders from opposite flanks. They cinched around the king, barbs slicing translucent hide, pinning its arms partially outward. Jon tore free, gasped a lungful of molten air, raised Longclaw in both hands, and drove the pommel spike into the fracture near the king's sternum. Cracks spider-webbed, racing through its chest like earthquake fissures. The blue in its eyes flared white. A thundercrack shattered the morning. The Frost King exploded into powdered ice, an expanding cloud that scattered on wind as though it had never been. Its sword fell, struck frozen earth, split into glittering dust. Silence cascaded outward, accompanied only by the roar of dragons circling above. Throughout the field the dead fell again, inert. Whites collapsed mid-stride. Others nearest the front fractured, unmoving. Those farther away still writhed, but their cohesion faltered, limbs twitching erratic, the hive hum of terrible unity gone. Jon zagged to a knee. Longclaw's edge smoked. The pommel spike glowed red where it had pierced the king. He looked up and saw the first dragon, a black leviathan he later learned was Drogon. Swooped low overhead, rider's white hair streaming behind. Daenerys' face glowed with reflection of wildfire still burning the fen. Purple eyes scanned the battlefield. When she spotted Jon, her mouth formed a fierce, relieved shape. She guided Drogon higher, banked over the distant rear of the undead horde, where the last organized knot of others attempted retreat. Bronze Rhaegal and Green Viserion shadowed her flank. Their flames rained upon the scattering foe. Where dragonfire met the walking dead, none rose a third time. On Dragonstone's smoking beach, Jaime stood beside the sea, arm in sling, watching black banners of smoke slither from the mouth of the ancient volcano. His body still rocked with the cadence of months at sea. His mind remained fixed on the moment Drogon had lifted him onto the saddle behind Daenerys mid-flight, wings buffeting, the black dreads descendant shrieking triumph. He had glimpsed Jon Snow far below, standing like a lone sword in a field of dying frost. That memory glittered behind his eyelids now. Equal parts pride and sorrow. Pride for what they had accomplished, sorrow for those who had not survived to witness the turning tide. Twice, in as many hours, he'd felt a ghostly ache where his father's voice might have scoffed at his choices. Twice, he had simply lifted his chin and ignored it. The waves crashed in lazy paw rhythms. Ash from the castle's relit forges drifted like volcanic snow across the surf. Dragonstone had become the new hinge of destiny. The Queen's host encamped on green terraces where obsidian protruded like dragon spines, while Unsullied oversaw the unloading of wildfire jars from Lysine hulks. The first ravens had flown to Storm's End, to High Garden, to Winterfell with a single sentence penned in Jaime's hand. The dragons are hatched and will defend the living. We march. Got. He heard steps upon crushed shell behind him. Daenerys approached, cloak snapping, her face carrying the weariness of cosmic weight accepted. She stopped at his side without greeting. They watched a gull wheel and dive, snatching a silver dart from black water. Ravens came from the wall before dawn, she said. Your friend Jon lives. He says the horde shattered after the king fell. They hunt remnants now. A breath he'd not known he held escape. I hoped the dragon's arrival would tip the scale. She eyed him sidelong. Your torch did more than tip. They stood in companionable silence. Gulls cried overhead. Wind whistled through basalt arches. The horizon to the north lay featureless, yet each imagined the wall, the fen, the torn snowfields, where a host of corpses now lay truly dead. He will need help, Jaime murmured, clearing what remains, and the south. He trailed off, thinking of Cersei, of Tywin's last directives, of Renly and Stannis, and the thousand small wars still tearing skin from the realm's battered body. Allies might crumble before help can reach him. Then we fly first, she said simply. Drogon is nearly healed. Wing of fire and wildfire together will cleanse the King's Road from gutters to ramparts. But I'm queen. My banner must plant upon castle and keep. She turned, expression fathomless. Would the lion still serve the dragon? Jaime's burned hand throbbed inside its sling. He recalled the moment he'd unsheathed a sword against the king she hailed as father. The layers of shame and necessity and grim resolve still coiled around that act. But at overtop, something newer lay. A conviction that his life might finally align with a purpose larger than pride. He bowed, slow, in earnest. The lion will roar as you command, he said. Because there's nothing left worth roaring for if winter's night returns. She touched the back of his hand, light, almost shy. It was a gesture of acknowledgement rather than affection. Then we make ready for King's Landing. Her gaze swept the horizon once more. Let the bells sound another queen's arrival. But this time we intend to spare the city, not burn it. Jaime managed a dry chuckle. My sister will not yield quietly. I have dragons. The simple statement carried no arrogance, only fact. Cersei has wildfire of her own, he cautioned. She hoards casks beneath the great septi, the guild hall, the hill of Rhaenys. If pressed, she may do what Aerys once tried. Daenerys' eyes cooled. Then we take the city before she is pressed. She extended her hand toward him. Ash fluttered across her sleeve like gray petals. Fly with me, Kingslayer, and together we break the wheel. He clasped her wrist. Not break. Forge. Into something kinder. She gave the faintest nod. Then she turned and strode back toward the stone steps, voice rising to command quartermasters. Sails must unfurl at next tide. Unsullied must drill with spear and flame. Dothraki scouts ride the crownlands. War, another war, loomed, but this one born of union rather than division. Jaime remained, staring across the turbulent Blackwater Bay. A glimmer of orange sparked on distant horizon, the sun ascending, or perhaps the first reflection of King's Landing's distant fires. He felt the planet tilt underfoot, the enormity of what lay ahead pressing like a second sky. Yet beneath that weight thrummed a certainty, a pulse in time with waves. The night had been halted. Not ended, but halted. Jon's sword, Bran's vision, Daenerys' flame, and his own scarred hand had woven one impossible day. The wind shifted, carrying a hint of spruce and snow from faraway mountains. He imagined Winterfell's ramparts glittering in morning radiance, Robb leaning over parapets counting new dawns. Catelyn exhaling relief, Bronn's chant stilled to murmur. He wondered if Grey Wind still roamed the fields, bloodied but undefeated. Someday, when this was done, he would stand upon those walls again and look into the eyes of the boy he had once meant to silence, and know whether redemption could survive memory. The tide lapped higher, foaming over his boots. He turned inland, following Daenerys toward the volcano's stair, and behind him, the sea erased every footprint he left, washing the slate clean for whatever stories would next be written. Catelyn stood on Winterfell's east rampart beneath banners charred at the hems, the air sharp with the scent of smithy and thaw. Since the Dragonfire victory news, the wind seemed warmer, though snow still sheeted the fields. She watched a column of Karstark survivors return, faces blackened, bearing their wounded on doors and hides. Steel rang from the yard where smelters cast spear tips anew. Far beyond, farmers coaxed turnip greens from septic ground. For the army would march south soon, and grain could not feed all mouths. Overhead, ravens circled in giddy spirals, wings flashing as dark sigils against bright sky. She pressed her palms together, murmured thanks to gods both old and new. Ned's dream had been that North and South stand united. Now, at last, the thread had begun to tie. A dragon queen with a lion knight by her side, a bastard heir forging legend in winter's waste. She half laughed at the absurdity, and half wept for every cost. A chill spidered up her spine. Footsteps approached, soft, measured. She turned to find Bran seated in the wicker-wheeled chair Hodor guided. But his eyes, they were wrong. Gone was the boyish spark. In its place shimmered a pale glow, as if the heart tree itself peered through the sockets. "We must open the crypts," he whispered. "Now." Catelyn blinked. "Open? Why?" "The kings of winter stir," Bran murmured. "Jon broke the master, but roots run deeper than crowns. We must wake the sleepers and ask their names." Her throat tightened. "Bran, you're warging dreams." "Not dream," he said, voice distant. "The dead hold secrets." Stone remembers. Only their swords may stem what still courses beneath the Dreadfort and Carhold, an ice river seeking new form. Catelyn knelt, clasped his thin hands. "They will open, love. But let Maester Luwin—" "No maesters," Bran insisted. "Only blood of the wolf. Take Sansa, take Arya. Lead us by lantern.1. A tremor threaded her heart. She remembered old legends of Stark kings entombed with iron and black salt around doorways, set to guard against the very mischief Bran now uttered. She should have felt fear, yet she found resolve rising instead. Sharp as Ned's smile on the day they brought Robb to her arms. The world had rewritten every rule in recent months. Why should death remain obedient? She stood. "Very well," she said softly. "We go tonight." Bran exhaled. His eyes cleared a fraction. "Thank you, Mother," he whispered, sounding suddenly small, lonely. She kissed his brow, though it felt cool as fresh-carved marble. As she descended the stairs, Grey Wind trotted across the yard toward the gates where the Karstarks entered. Children gathered to stroke his blood-matted fur. He tolerated them with a weary patience that made her chest ache. Some beasts were forged for these wars, same as men. On the King's Road halfway between the ruined Twins and the smoking outskirts of King's Landing, Sir Brienne of Tarth dragged a Lannister battle standard. Through muddy ruts, gold threads dulled by soot, she had followed Renly's banner south until war songs turned to whispers of white death. She had broken from his host at Bitterbridge, seeking her own answer to oaths long shattered. News that Jaime Lannister fought for the living confounded her sense of order. Yet something inside her sparked at the story of a lion bending honor's knee. She quickened her pace toward the capital, vowing to find truth behind rumor. In the Queen's solar, Cersei listened to the same rumors with growing fury. Her black maester whispered of dragon wings seen above Dragonstone, of wildfire unleashed upon undead, of Jaime riding those wings. She smashed a goblet against a pillar, cursed the King's Guard to scour every alley for dissent. Beneath the Red Keep, pyromancers looked uneasily to barrels lining vaulted cellars, realizing they now served a queen who weighed life as coin. Varys watched and waited, little birds singing increasingly of lion jaws closing on themselves. High above this stew of politics, Tyrion Lannister sailed round Duskendale in a converted cog, packed with refugee orphans. He'd fled the capital when dark tidings arrived of Cersei's plan to burn the city rather than lose it. His heart panged for wine and witty retorts, but he wielded ledger and quill like weapons, forging lists of supplies to feed winter-struck towns. When ravens brought word that Jaime had secured Daenerys' support, Tyrion allowed himself a smile that split the ocean fog. All roads bent to convergence. The mother of dragons on Blackwater's doorstep, the last shreds of undead scattering north, stark ghosts stirring under Winterfell stone, and across the waterlines of fate Brienne, Tyrion, Davos, Yara, Stannis, Melisandre, all souls drawn by gravity of war's final forge. Nightfall descended upon Dragonstone, the sea glittering with reflections of a half-moon and the restless glow of forge fires. Within the castle's belly, unsullied filled clay pots with pale green syrup, fresh wildfire courtesy of Jaime's recipes, and the pyromancers, who had defected at Tyrion's secret invitation. Above the courtyard Drogon lay with wings stretched like stilled thunderheads, scarred membrane glistening where Icespear had struck. Daenerys approached, touched the healed seam with calloused fingers. The beast rumbled, eyes narrowing in pleasure. Across the yard, Jaime supervised the fitting of new saddles reinforced by bronze. When he caught the queen's gaze, he offered a half-smile. Tomorrow they would sail, some by ship, some by sky, intent on wresting a city from tyranny without burning it to ash. But tonight, Daenerys joined Jaime near the seawall, where waves separated black horizon from glimmering stars. He produced 2 tin cups of arbor, red preserved miraculously from Lys. They drank in silence. After a time she spoke. "Do you believe the world can learn after so long a season of blood?" The question lingered between them, as delicate as icicles forming on castle eaves. Jaime considered the miles behind. A child he tried to murder, now commanding powers older than history. A bastard once scorned, now hero of winter. Himself, once the sword of arrogant kings, now smithing alliances with former slaves and wildlings. "I believe," he said, "that when death comes walking, a man learns quickly what life should mean. That lesson won't fade soon." He poured second measures, though the bottle ran nearly dry. "For some, perhaps it never will." She breathed an unsteady sigh. In Valyria before the doom, they said dragons were the world made flesh. Fire, power, chaos. But sometimes I fear my children mirror man's worst hungers. And yet they burned the dead, Jaime replied, and spared the living at your word. Distant thunder rumbled, not from storm cloud but from Rhaegal testing newly armored talons against basalt. Daenerys' lips quirked. "Jon Snow will need to teach me the names of every northern hamlet when snow melts. I intend each to rebuild rather than bury its dead again. We must survive the queen behind the red walls first," Jaime reminded, though not unkindly. "Yes." Her tone flattened with resolve. "I will not become her reflection by destroying what I claim to save, no matter the cost." He gazed at her, seeing in the flickering torchlight not the mad dragon's daughter but something else. A woman forged by years of exile, tempered by slave chains, seared by funeral pyres, yet able still to weigh forgiveness against wrath. He recognized that shape of self-transformation, for it matched the wound in his own skin. Together they turned toward the dark silhouette of kings landing across the gulf. Faint glimmers marked the city's fires, each spark a story, a life, a hope for dawn. Between them and those lights lay tides, wind, and the vast, uncertain labyrinth of human hearts. But dragons crossed sky like comets now, and undead kings had shattered, and wheels of fate creaked into new grooves. Jaime lifted his cup in a silent toast, poured the last drop into the sea. The queen mirrored the gesture, and for an instant, the red wine swirling in moonlight resembled blood sunk into water. Sacrament offered, price accepted. Above, the 3 dragons beat their wings once, twice, as if affirming. Morning would come soon, bearing sails and banners, and decisions that might either mend the realm or rip it wider. But morning was not yet. Night held them in a fragile, shining hush neither winter nor fire could claim. And under that hush, two unlikely allies found a moment's grace before history turned its next page. Far to the north, in a crypt long sealed, Catelyn lowered a torch past tombs where kings of winter slept. Stone lids rumbled as ancient gusts exhaled. Bran whispered names older than memory, and in the flicker of flame, the iron swords laid across stone knees shimmered, some brightening, some cracking. Ice and fire, future and past, dragon and wolf and lion. All threads drew tighter, humming with the promise of one last vast reckoning. And somewhere above the clouds, between stars, the red comet flared anew, carving a luminous scar across the firmament as if to sign its name upon the living sky. Reminder, warning, prophecy, all at once, heralding a world that would rise, phoenix-like, from the ashes of both summer's folly and winter's grief. Day. The first silver blush of dawn poured itself across the courtyard of Dragonstone like watered wine, casting mauve light upon walls that once echoed only dragons and ghosts. The citadel breathed in low gusts as outriders scrambled across the basalt causeway, loading the last barrels of wildfire onto shallow draft skiffs. Sailcloths snapped, chains rattled. Below the sea wall, water lapped in a rhythmless heartbeat, as though the tide itself hesitated before history's next breath. Jaime stood at the head of the pier, cloak snapping around scorched mail. Rhaegal swept overhead, sending salt spray across his brow. The dragon's shadow swallowed the ramparts, and every soldier on the quay paused to watch the great bronze belly burn across the sky. When the creature banked seaward, men remembered tasks and hurried on. The wind smelled of forges, of soot, of wet iron, yet beneath it lay a tremble of citrus blossoms born from storm's end fields. Jaime thought it smelled like fate, sweet and dangerous. Across the pier, a sleek warship kissed the dock. Twin masts already gaff-rigged, hull sheathed in dark cedar rubbed with whale oil. Its name, Storm's Mercy, gleamed in modest gilt. Davos Seaworth leaned upon the gangplank, wooden fingers tracing the grain of the rail, his single good hand raised in greeting. The Onion Knight's lined face showed equal parts dread and duty. "Ere mourning for thieves, my lord," Davos said as Jaime approached. "We steal a throne and pray someone knows how to pay for it after." Jaime allowed a weary smile. "Or we steal enough time for winter's debt to clear. Which charter do you favor?" "The one that keeps my sons breathing." Davos studied wildfire barrels with hooded gaze. "And my queen somewhat sane." Jaime followed his line of sight. Daenerys stood atop the seawall. Drogon crouched behind her like a black-scaled fortress. Wind beat serpentine across the dragon's wings, yet the queen's posture was still, regal, an island of calm and storm peers. Gray braids laced down her back, twined with rubies now dulled by soot. When she turned, her eyes met Jaime's across the distance, violet irises alive with purpose. The message required no words. He tipped two fingers and turned back to Davos. "We sail?" Jaime asked. "In 1 hour's tide." Davos exhaled. "Hand of the Queen will ride the flagship." Sirens of lice and Yunkai gull split the van. "And you, sir?" "Dragonback." Jaime flexed the deadened fingers of his left hand, feeling phantom fire across ruined nerves. "Drogon bears me to the Lion Gate. We cut the chain at the river mouth, open the harbor to make landing." Davos raised a brow. "If Cersei sees you coming on a monster's shoulders, she'll burn every last cask beneath the city. That's why Bronn's infiltrating the Guildhall tonight." Jaime's mouth twisted. Give him enough coin and he'll rat on his own shadow. He guts the pyromancer's stores, replaces brass triggers with iron pins that seize in heat. A muscle in his jaw ticked. "I pray the man's greed outstrips his caution." "Greed keeps half the realm alive," Davos muttered. "Still, if the Queen's wildfire lights, Dragonstow's gift will look a candle beside the sun. King's Landing may not rise from its own grave this time. Then we sever her hand before she can strike." Jaime's gaze drifted landward where black cliffs met a pale lace of distant cloud. And if all else fails, a Kingslayer's duty repeats. Davos' silence carried equal parts reverence and sorrow. He squeezed Jaime's shoulder once, then turned to bark orders. Haul line. Square that yard, you salt-dazed twins. Cast off in 15. Cersei Lannister paced the Tower of the Hand beneath vaulted windows draped in red. Smoke curled from braziers. Incense failed to mask the stink of tallow and fear. Beside her, Qyburn read reports in a whisper. Ships sighted off Dragonstone. Unsullied regiments marching from Duskendale. Dothraki outriders riding the Stormlands granaries. But the words washed across her mind like thin wine. She tasted only 3 syllables. Dragons have come. Outside, below the Red Keep, King's Landing seethed. 6 moons of famine had carved hollows beneath every cheek. Half the wells ran dry where rats clogged cisterns. Yet still, her city stood, ringed by scorpion ballistae, and stocked with barrels critical and volatile. She imagined the moment the dragons descended. She imagined green gouts of wildfire leaping to meet them, carving fire against fire. Her hand strayed to a velvet cloth covering the master detonator device, arrayed upon a marble plinth. One tug of braided fuse from the central burn pot would ignite linked tunnels snaking through the city's underbelly. The sept of Baelor's foundations, the Dragon Pit's vault, the granaries along the Blackwater Rush. Jaime once called her penchant for wildfire a plaything of lunacy. Yet who would call it madness when the enemy soared above, with wings of living napalm? Footsteps tapped. Ser Boros Blount entered, helm tucked beneath hammy arm. A Lady Brienne of Tarth requests audience, your grace. She carries the sword Oathkeeper and flies a white flag. Cersei's lip curled. White? The cow plays at peace parley? She claims to bear a letter from your brother Tyrion, my queen. Boros's voice wavered. And from Jaime. The name split open a wound she had sown too often. Cersei turned to the window, studied dawn glinting upon the distant harbor chain. Bring her, she said. Moments later, Brienne entered, stooping below the lintel. Red sunback lit her hair to scorched copper, yet she stank of road dust and sweat, no courtier's perfume. A sealed parchment bore Tyrion's broken chain sigil. Cersei slit the wax, with the dirk she kept in a boot. Her eyes skimmed swift. Words cut. Dearest sister. Dragons now wings above your walls. Yet they come not to raise, but to liberate. Bend knee. Spare the city. The people you claim to love will burn elsewise. I entreat you as brother and as hand to a queen who values life. Surrender and live. Jaime flies with Daenerys. He begs you listen. Tyrion. Cersei crumpled the letter, nails biting flesh. My brothers collude with the silver whore to unseat me, she hissed. Yet send this giant wench to soften my heart. Brienne stepped forward, blue eyes unwavering. I swore to Cat Stark-Eyed protect her daughters. They stand with Dragon Queen now. But they desire no sack, only that you yield, my queen, and spare the innocents. She paused, voice softening. Emmy would not march if he saw no hope for peace. Cersei's laugh cracked like ice. Jaime once leapt from a tower to save our secret, then fled north to lick wolf paws. I will not bow to traitors and bastards. Now stay. She strode to the plinth, drew back the cloth, and revealed the triple-latched ignition device. A wheel of blackened bronze, flanked by 2 cogs carved into lion maws. Brienne stiffened. You would kill thousands to deny Daenerys. Brienne's voice trembled. I would kill every last flea if it kept my crown. Cersei caressed the wheel. Tell Jaime that when he wheels his dragon over the sept. Brienne's gauntleted hand shifted to hilt, but did not draw. If you do this, he'll be forced to stop you again. Cersei's grin bared teeth. Let him climb another stack of corpses to reach me. He will arrive too late. She waved Boros forward. Take her to the black cells. Brienne's broad shoulders sagged, but she did not fight as guards slid irons on her wrists. She met Cersei's gaze one final time. Hate may blind you, your grace, but it will not outshine dragonfire. Cersei looked away. Then, may the world burn bright enough to blind us all. High over Blackwater Bay, Drogon's wings carved thunder from morning air. Beneath the world flowed like a painted map, The fingers of the Blackwater Rush, the patchwork of scorched wheat fields, the distant shimmer of the King's Gate. In the second saddle just behind Daenerys, Jaime held tight to harness loops, his right hand steadying her waist as the wind howled around. Below, a dozen smaller dragons, young hatchlings gifted by distant supporters, spiraled under Rhaegal's guidance, their shrieks an adolescent chorus. On the warship decks of Storm's Mercy and Lysine Corsair, wildling archers craned necks at this aerial cavalcade. The lead ship's prow split water gloom where the river met the bay, while Davos shouted to row captains to close with the harbor chain. Aboard the Corsair, Tyrion stood on crate vantage, spyglass trained up into the sun, face pale as parchment. Jaime felt Drogon's muscles ripple, a vibrating hum through scales and bone. The dragon's shadow passed over the coastal garrisons. Sandstone redoubts, Maiden's Hill, the half-collapsed Sept Spire, where faith once lived. Soldiers on ramparts raised scorpion quarrels, strings tightened. The first bolt hissed skyward. Drogon banked, the projectile missing by yards. Rhaegal answered with a bar of jade flame that incinerated a ballista crew in a single gasp. Daenerys shouted, "The chain!" Jaime scanned the river mouth. There, across the channel, the massive links glinted bronze green, tension locked between twin stone towers. Boats could not breach until it unclasped, but their sabotage plan hinged on bronze infiltration of the South Tower's gearhouse. From this height, Jaime could not see whether torque wheels already spun. He cursed, then tapped Daenerys' shoulder. "We must dive," he yelled. She guided Drogon into plummeting stoop that set his stomach adrift. Wind howled louder, whipping hair across his eyes. They leveled 50 feet above water, racing the channel like a thrown spear. Crossbow bolts peppered the air. Drogon snapped one from Sky with a lazy tilt of jaws, the shaft splintering against obsidian teeth. Ahead, the south chain tower loomed. Smoke leaked from arrow slits. A good sign. Jaime glimpsed a lean figure leaping from a window into the river. Bronn. He clutched a rope, swinging toward a skiff. Seconds later, grinding groan reverberated. The enormous chain slumped, links cascading into water, sending tidal waves against stone pilings. The river mouth yawned open. Davos shouted from Storm's Mercy, "Full sail, drive her through!" Ships cut upriver, hulls scraping submerged chain but clearing nonetheless. Lannister loyalist drawmans at anchor attempted to pivot, but dragons strafed decks with fire. Sails caught, men dove. The harbor became a cauldron. Drogon circled once, then climbed, arrow-flecked, but unharmed. Jaime saw the red keep shining high atop Aegon's Hill. Heart of a rotten promise. "To the keep," he urged. Daenerys nodded. In Winterfell's crypt, torches cast wavering halos across faces chiseled from stone. Dust motes danced like snow inside torchlight. Catelyn, Arya, and Sansa flanked Bran's chair. Hodor lingered behind, eyes wide. At their feet lay the cracked lid of King Rickard Stark's sarcophagus, marble hairline fracturing outward in spiderweb arcs. Bran's voice, soft but insistent, guided, "Lift the sword." Arya reached into the dusty cavity, fingers brushing coarse wolf furs. Dry bone. She found the sword, an ancient blade pocked by rust, spiral hilt wrapped in tattered leather. Yet as she freed it, flakes of corrosion drifted away like ash in a sudden breeze, revealing metal of strange dull silver beneath. The blade hummed, faint as breath. Sansa gasped. "Valyrian?" she whispered. "No," Bran said. "Forged before Valyria's fire learned speech. The first men called it Knight's Memory." Catelyn's torchlight shimmered along the fuller, revealing runes so time-worn they seemed painted by shadow. The blade was long, slender, heavy with stories. Bran closed eyes. Ice itself answered the forging, made into steel that could cut shadow. Arya's grin sharpened like the sword's edge. "We'll need a new scabbard." "You'll need more than that," a voice echoed from the stair. Theon Greyjoy, hair disheveled, blood-stained cloak clinging. He descended, supporting a one-armed Karstark soldier. "Scouts report frost rifts opening near Dreadfort." Something stirs beneath those pink flayed towers. Bran's face clouded. A river of the dead runs deep. It must be sealed at the source. Night's memory will drink it dry. Arya tested balance, blade eager in her grip. Sansa touched the pommel, expression equal parts fear and wistful courage. Catelyn breathed a mother's silent prayer. King's Landing roared with panic. Market stalls in Flea Bottom awoke to a sky streaked by dragon wings. Peddlers clutched children. Small folk fled down alleyways, where the guttering flames of burning towers cast nightmarish shadows. At first, the people believed doom arrived. Then they saw dragons baiting scorpions in green fire, not small folk, and a thin, wavering hope took root. Maybe deliverance wore scales. Tyrion's vanguard landed at Mudgate amid smoke and screams. He waded knee-deep through surf, bellowing for order. Davos and a host of Storm's End spearmen split the crowds, shepherding them away from wildfire storehouses. "Find shelters west of Cobbler's Square," Davos shouted. "Follow the Onion Banner. Food waits." Staving off panic was half the victory. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei watched through arrow slit as dragons torched City Watch scorpions along the walls. Qyburn stammered, "Your Grace, we must retreat to Maegor's Holdfast. Set the secondary fuses." She silenced him with backhand slap. "We light every fuse now. Burn them from sky. Bury them in rubble." "Bebezawashi." She gestured. 4 black-cloaked alchemists hurried to the plinth. Bronze sabotage slowed them. Gears jammed, fuses crusted with resin. But Qyburn ripped loose jammed spindles, relic lengths of hemp lacquered in naphtha. A golden lion butt end sputtered. It began to smoke. Above the throne room, footsteps rang. The doors crashed open. Ser Boros staggered, face bloodied, Brienne's broken chains around his neck. Behind him charged Brienne herself, gauntlets slick crimson, followed by half a dozen Red Keep servants in revolt. Cersei stepped back, eyes narrowing. "Enough," Brienne said, voice raw-dotty. "End this or I will end you." Cersei's laughter shook like glass near fracture. "My brother's pet thinks to bark orders in my hall? Press that wheel!" She screamed at Qyburn. He dragged fuse toward central wick. Wildfire fumes curled luminous green. Brienne lunged, sword flashing. Qyburn shrieked as Oathkeeper severed his wrist. Alchemists scattered. Cersei drew a dagger, turned on Brienne, slashing side. Blade grazed cuirass. Sparks flew. Brienne shoved her, refusing to strike lethal blow. "There are children outside," she rasped. Cersei spat. "All die screaming soon." From the doorway sounded a softer, deadly voice. "Not today, sister." Jaime stepped into torchlight, hair plastered by sea mist, soot dusting armor. His right hand gripped a short stabbing spear tip forged of obsidian. His left, though scarred, rested on sword hilt. Behind him flickered embers of green flame where King's Guard had fallen. Cersei froze. "You fly monsters now," she said, voice breaking. "I learned from the best," Jaime replied. He advanced, gaze on fuse, sputter. "Call them off. Let these people live." "Blah. People." Cersei laughed bitterly. "They spat at Joffrey's corpse. They jeered our grief. Why should I bleed for their forgiveness?" "Because you once loved them," Jaime said. "Because you remembered being their queen." "I remember wine," she hissed. "I remember father's legacy rotting by their laughter." Her dagger shook. Jaime's heart cracked at the sight. He took a step closer. Brienne watched, Oathkeeper lowered, blood seeping where dagger cut hauberk died. The chamber spun with smoke and volatile fumes. "Lower the blade, Cersei," he pleaded. "Look at me." Her eyes flicked down his ruined left hand, to burn marks. Something softened, then hardened twice as quick. "You chose the wolves. I chose life." He reached, slowly. "Choose with me." She raised the dagger to her throat. "If I yield, I die dragon's prisoner. I will not be paraded." "You'll be tried," he said. "By those we wronged. That's penance." She slashed downward at the fuse, intending to sever it from tampering. Jaime lunged, obsidian spear glinting. The point pierced cloth and slid between ribs. Cersei gasped, eyes wide, knife falling with soft clink. Jaime caught her as knees buckled, lowering against gilded pillar. Blood blossomed dark across her bodice. "Valyrian steel," she whispered. "Dragonglass," he murmured. "It kills monsters." Tears broke free. "But you're still my sister." She coughed blood. Smile sad. "And you, my fool knight." Fingers trembling, she stroked his jaw, leaving crimson smear. "Do what must, to keep our child safe." Her gaze drifted toward shadows where a young boy peeked. The last of her hidden bastards, father unknown. Jaime's heart wrenched. "I will," he swore. Cersei's breath rattled, eyes stared glassily. Jaime closed lids with two shaking fingers. Silence swallowed the hall, pierced only by slow crackle of fuse still burning near plinth. Brienne dashed forward, stomped embers. She clasped Jaime's shoulders, steadied him. "It's over," she said. He shook head. "Only this part." Afternoon's sun found Daenerys ascending the Red Keep's broken stair to the throne room. Dust-veiled, shattered Kingsguard statues. Dragonfire scars, charred high timbers where Targaryen banners once hung. Tyrion walked at her side, small feet crunching glass shards. They stepped over bodies, pyromancers, guards, silent witnesses whose blood cooled fast on marble. Atop iron steps, Jaime waited, clothed now in plain linen, sword unbelted. In his arms was a child of perhaps 6, hair pale gold, eyes puffy from tears. He knelt as Queen approached, offered child forward. "My sister's last innocence," Jaime said. "He bears no blame." Daenerys accepted the boy's trembling hand, knelt to meet his gaze. "What is your name?" "Lionel," he whispered. She smiled softly. "Lionel will have a place where swords no longer frighten." She beckoned unsullied, handing them charge. The boy looked back once at Jaime, then vanished down corridor flanked by eunuch guards. Daenerys straightened, surveying the throne. Iron blades fused by dragonfire centuries ago, now shadowed by cracks where wildfire tremor shook stones. She spoke without taking seat. "This crown requires more than blood. It will be remade by council of every realm, lords, small folk, freedmen." Her eyes flicked down to Jaime. "Do you accept?" "I'll build roads to bring them here," he said faintly. Tyrion cleared throat, tears bright. "A new page begins." Daenerys nodded. Then at last she sat, a hush rolling outward even through empty hall, as though ghosts paused to watch the moment the wheel's axle shifted. Snow clouds menaced Winterfell as Arya tested Knight's memory on a straw dummy. The blade hummed, severing arm, torso, neck with effortless glide. Maester Luwin watched, quill still. Theon rode in with scouting falcons. Trenches of ice water forming unnatural rings around Dreadfort. Bran predicted undead remains surging from deep crypts there, Bolton horrors buried with flayed souls. Robb read the message from King's Landing. Cersei dead, Daenerys crowned by council, dragons garrisoning the capital. Relief warred with worry. He turned to mother and sisters. The South beds its new queen. The North must heal its own wounds. Catelyn nodded, though shadow haunted her eyes. First we slay the corpse river beneath Dreadfort walls. Grey wind snarled agreement. At dawn's first, Lilac washed Jon Snow, and Lady Mage led ragged but exultant host through Castle Black's gate. Piles of frozen corpses smoked where fires still burned. The wall itself sighed, great fissures knitting in midday warmth, as if magic returned by the Frost King's fall. Jeor Mormont greeted them with bare-bone mug of ale. "You broke their spine," he said, voice thick. "We hold till summer's sun now." Jon raised mug, but memory of Bran's warning tugged at veins. "Not quite," he muttered. "Ice still beats under our soil." Letters arrived that eve by Hawke. Daenerys crowned, King's Landing spared, Jaime alive. Jon sat near the fire, reading lamp guttering, trying to picture the Lion Knight on Dragon's back. Then he penned return. Send south every blacksmith who can work Valyrian trace. Knight's memory rides against Dreadfort soon. The Red Keep Sept was repurposed as council hall. Around a star-shaped table sat Tyrion, Davos, Varys, Missandei, Yara Greyjoy, Gendry of Storm's End, and Samwell Tarly, newly arrived with scrolls on ancient metallurgy. Jaime leaned against balustrade, listening as Daenerys described northern plea for aid. Winter's venom still seeps from old crypt under the flayed man's seat, she said. We will lend dragons to cauterize. But not armies, Tyrion cautioned. The realm must see coin minted in bread, not more war. Davos tapped calloused fingers. Give them smiths, grain, maesters bearing books. Show we are protectors, not conquerors. Jaime spoke. Send me to Winterfell. I pledge to stand with Bran before this ends. Daenerys studied him, then nodded. Take Rhaegal. Dragons should remain visible, emblems of alliance. Gasps circled. Jaime inclines head. They left King's Landing under violet dusk, Rhaegal's wings streaming shadows across black water. Below, Brienne rode at the vanguard, flanked by a dozen Stormlander knights sworn newly to the crown of the living. Crates of grain trundled in ox carts. Ingots of raw Valyrian steel, harvested from Red Keep ornament, clanged in wagons behind. At their rear limped a tired but determined Gendry, hammer-strapped, dreaming of forges built beneath Winterfell's towers. High above, Jaime guided Rhaegal northward, heart perched between hope and haunting. Cersei's last breath lingered in his lungs. Yet each wing beat carried new air, crisp as first winter apples. For the first time since youth, Jaime Lannister believed tomorrow could be forged rather than won. Beneath the dragon's shadow villages peeked from snow, lights glimmering like scattered jewelry lost upon the dark earth. People looked up, some screaming, some cheering. Jaime's chest tightened at thought the realm might no longer cower from wings overhead. Days stretched. They crossed the neck amid mists where crannogmen saluted with reeds on fishing spears. They skirted Barrowton, where rows of candles honored dead from fen battle. And finally, under starlit hush, Winterfell's gray towers rose, banners fluttering direwolf, dragon, lion entwined upon new cloth. Jaime circled once, then spiraled down into yard, dusted by fresh snow. Rhaegal landed with quake, wings mantling, steam billowing from nostrils. Robb strode forward, cloak sweeping. Behind him came Catelyn, Sansa, Arya, the latter brandishing Knight's memory slung across shoulder. Bran waited in chair beneath Hearttree, eyes luminous in torchlight. Jaime dismounted, knees buckling slightly. Robb clasped his forearm. It's done in south, he said. Nearly, Jaime replied. We have one more river to freeze. They gathered in Great Hall. Samwell spread scrolls depicting subterranean aquifers beneath Dreadfort, blackwater veins thrumming unnatural cold. Bran traced lines with fingertip, murmuring in some lost tongue. Arya traced Knight's memory along seams, sparks static snapping. Jon arrived 2 nights later, hair frosted, gray wind bounding behind. Reunions were brief. War brewed fast. Horses watered, dragons fed, smiths hammered Valyrian-laced spearheads, while Rhaegal's flame-tempered edges. Gendry and Mikken forged iron-shod wedges designed to crack permafrost fissures, each tip engraved with rune of Morningstar. Calendar turned. Final moon of winter's 3rd year. Beneath shimmering curtains of aurora, the last host of living marched east toward Dreadfort. Wolves howled. Bears lumbered. Dragons soared. Jaime rode beside Jon, their armors scratched but mended. 2 men who had begun as mirror foes now converging for final thrust. Bran guided from warged dreams, vision of tunnels, glimmering pale blue. Sansa rallied healers. Catelyn commanded supply trains. Davos kept lines fed. Theon, face lined by regret, scouted roads he once knew as raider. And throughout the night, echoes of drumbeats rolled across snow plains, as if old kings inside their stone beds pounded time for mortal hearts above. They reached the Dreadfort under slate dawn. Bolton banners hung limp. Flayed men, still bleeding, rust down walls. But no sentries walked parapets. Instead, Frost vapor curled from arrow slits, and a low moan carried like whale song under ice. Arya gripped Knight's memory. "Shall we?" Jon nodded. "Open the gate." Battering rams smashed inner portcullis. The courtyard lay silent but for creak of leather harnesses. Suddenly ground shuddered, stone cracked. A fountain of black ice erupted where well once sat. Out poured whites swollen by subterranean cold, eyes emberless yet animate. They rushed. Spears of dragonglass met them, flashing, biting. Rhaegal's flame washed over battlements, sealing breaches in glassy slag. Beneath Keep's main tower, Bran directed small cadre to ancient crypt, discovered on earlier maps, the Weeping Root. Jaime followed, torch aflame. Stairs spiraled into gloom where frost rimed mortar joints. At base lay iron door beaten by centuries, its bar engraved with flayed sigil overwritten long ago by swirling knotwork of the children. The metal breathed cold mist. Bran placed palm upon glyph. It glowed faint blue, then bled red. Door groaning wide. Beyond yon cavern, floor of mirror ice, yet beneath surface swam shapes skeletal but moving. A true river of dead, withheld by unseen sorcery. At chamber's core rose obsidian monolith carved to thorn-crowned spire. Jaime felt dagger tremble at hip. Arya drew Knight's memory. Its blade shivered like struck bell. Bran spoke. "The heart of Bolton cruelty. They tapped this vein, used ice death to flay souls." He looked to Jaime. "Break the stone. Free the river." Jon hefted warhammer. On 3. He swung. The hammer rang. Spire cracked. Obsidian splinters launching. Black water boiled upward. Jaime thrust dragonglass spear into fracture. Arya slashed open fissure. Runes on blade igniting blue-white. Bran chanted words no man should carry. Tower walls shuddered. The river surged, but now its current glowed silver, not blue. White's clawing courtyard above stiffened, shattered. Outside, wolves howled, triumph. Within cavern, icy torrents slowed, then stilled, frozen in place mid-curl like sculpture of glass. Silence swallowed depth. Bran sagged, face drained. Jaime caught him. Arya sheathed sword. Jon rested hammerhead on floor, chest heaving. "It is done," Bran whispered. Winter's last root severed. Spring did not arrive next dawn, nor the next dozen, but sap began to flow beneath bark. Snowmelt trickled from Winterfell walls in glistening channels, and carpenters repaired barns without gloves. In King's Landing, orange trees budded pale blossoms in orphanage courtyards Tyrion financed. Far east, Daenerys hosted lords from Dorne to Vale at a great moot, forging charter of realms reborn. Every house granted voice, every small folk levy weighed, each law subject to council of seasons convening thrice yearly. Jaime returned north once more, bearing sealed queen's hand, to see fields where barley seedlings poke through thaw. He walked ramparts with Brienne, speaking little but sharing the quiet peace of labor complete. Below, Bran guided Potter's wheel for new city water pipes. Arya drilled recruits with Knight's memory. Sansa took counsel on trade of obsidian jewelry. Catelyn planted earliest apple saplings beside Heart Tree. One evening, Jaime sought Bran beneath Weirwood, where boys' eyes reflected twilit sky. Jaime knelt. "Is it truly over?" Bran smiled, tired but certain. "For this turning, and the next?" Jaime asked. "We brace for it together," Bran said. "Fire and frost, lion and wolf, dragon and song." Branches rustled overhead, shedding last snow clumps. Jaime stood, lifted face to starlight. Somewhere far south, Rhaegal roared from Dragonstone Eyrie. Somewhere east, Drogon made it across open sky. Above, the red comet had faded to faint scar, but its memory burned in every new dawn. Jaime walked the silent yard. Children laughed near the blacksmith's forge, shaping tiny iron wolves on anvil sparks. A young girl with sandy hair paused, waved as he passed. He returned nod. Hope, he thought, was loudest in little voices. He paused at gatehouse, gaze sweeping winter-scarred but living plains. Heart thrummed slow. He breathed deep the scent of pine, of thaw, of cooling iron. Redemption was no single act. It was every breath after. In that hush, Jaime Lannister finally understood courage. Not in striking kings or flying dragons, but in waking each morning, ready to rebuild what night tries to undo. Somewhere a raven croaked, wings beating toward south, toward dawn. And the world, bruised, cracked, stitched with new seams, kept turning. Ga-K. A breeze rolled over the ridges west of Winterfell and drifted down among the budding apple orchards like an unseen tide, stirring newly sewn banners where the direwolf now shared cloth with dragon wings and a stag's crown. The wind tasted of wet loam and early heather, smelling almost of spring, not the bright, reckless spring of songs, but something raw and careful. A fragile promise pressed into thawing ground, unsure whether the sky would keep faith. Inside the keep, the forges no longer screamed with war but breathed in measured sighs of industry. Mikken and Gendry labored side by side at the main anvil, shaping plowshares from captured Lannister helms, reshaping chainmail into hinges and latchhooks. Sparks rose like ephemeral fireflies and died an inch from flight. Smoke wreathed the rafters, yet through the haze, the blacksmiths spoke in quiet voices of crop cycles, of tool balances, of how the river ice broke 10 days earlier than the year before. Jaime walked between posts of half-framed scaffolding, surveying the wall where new shutters were fitted. A pair of mummers, refugees from the Trident, painted blooming direwolves onto the fresh pine. One dipped his brush, pausing whenever a swallow's cry echoed from the tower eaves, as if the bird's note might guide each stroke. Jaime watched until his shadow stretched against the stones, then moved on, boots clicking loud in the hush that followed. He found Bran near the glass garden, its windows removed for repairs, sunlight making dust swirl like golden motes. A broad, low table stood at the center of the chamber, a map of the north, freshly drawn with ink so black it gleamed blue. Small iron figures occupied castles, towns, and ports. Most were dire wolves, but scattered among them were lions, krakens, and dragons the size of thumbnail coins. Bran sat in his chair with palms pressed lightly to the map's edge, as though he felt through paper into soil. When Jaime entered, Bran's head rose, the pale streaks in his eyes catching light like veined marble. "You said the road to the last hearth needs new stone," Bran murmured before Jaime could speak. "The quarry at Longbarrow will open again once the river barges run. We'll divert 3 gangs from the Winter Town project." Jaime's lips twitched. "You're reading minds now. Only footfalls." Bran's faint smile reached corners of his mouth, making him look briefly like a boy again instead of a seer. "And the roots underneath." Jaime approached, studying the tiny painted tokens. "You've placed a kraken at Flint's finger." The Greyjoys offered ships to carry obsidian from Dragonstone quicker than overland wagons. "Asha demands proof of good faith, so I grant her a foothold, to keep her honest." "And the lions?" Sir Kevin's youngest petition for restoration of Derry lands. Tyrion thought mercy wise. Bran's gaze skimmed southward to the toy dragons clustered around King's Landing. "Balance, Sir Jaime. It anchors the realm." Jaime rested burned fingers on northern coast. "Any word from Casterly Rock? A council of merchants urges your uncle to swear fealty to Queen Daenerys, but Gyrion's eldest still believes Lannisport can raise a golden fleet to challenge dragon wings." Bran closed eyes briefly. "Winds of arrogance linger." Jaime grunted. "They'll blow themselves out when they see Drogon stoop over Blackwater." "Perhaps." Bran opened eyes. Sometimes stubborn branches must be pruned for the trunk to flourish. A distant horn sounded from the outer ward. 3 short notes, followed by a flourish. Jaime straightened. "The delegation from White Harbor." "And from the wall," Bran added softly. "Jones' host marches behind them." Jaime drew a breath. He did not realize he'd been holding. He glanced once more at the iron figures, then at Bran. "You'll press it?" "Only watch," Bran said. "The land speaks through other mouths now." The procession that wound through Winterfell gates before midday looked more like a harvest festival than a military column. At its head rode Wyman manderly atop a white gelding, great belly swaying with each step, his banner poles sprouting gaudy cloth fish that fluttered pink and blue. Behind him trundled wagons heaped with salt cod, dried ling, and sacks of barley. Offerings for castle stores. Next came Jon Snow's spearmen, half in black, half in Mormont green, marching light-footed with their helms swinging at belts instead of strapped to heads. They carried only dragonglass daggers now, as if iron could rest at last. The direwolf Grey Wind paced beside Jon's mount, pausing often to muzzle giggling children pushing through crowd lines. Gendry hammered the tower bell in salute. Sansa directed stable hands while Arya perched on the fountain, legs swinging, knight's memory across her knees. Catelyn stood at Robb's side on platform above the yard, hair shot through with silver threads that shimmered each time wind lifted her veil. When Jon dismounted, Robb descended and embraced him. One brother's forearm braced at the other's shoulder. Words failed beneath the roar of the crowd, yet Robb's smile told enough. Jaime observed from the steps, arms folded. Jon noticed, returned a nod shaded by history and tempered in gratitude. Minutes later, bread, salt and cups of watered wine were shared beneath a newly raised awning of white canvas. Manderly spoke of rebuilding the harbor piers with stronger timbers. Glover championed chartered caravans to bring southern seed north. Tormund Giantsbane devoured 3 loaves while vowing to teach plowlines to any freefolk who fancied soil over reaving. Late afternoon sun angled low, gold slant glinting from half-repaired battlements. Jaime slipped unnoticed toward the small Godswood gate. The racket of the yard faded beneath whisper of wind through first young leaves. He thought to kneel at the pool, but a figure already stood there. Brienne, her reflection broken into ripples by slow circling carp. She turned at his approach, expression unreadable. Oathkeeper hung at hip, its red scabbard catching afternoon light. For a moment, words jammed behind his teeth. Then she spoke. Tyrion's courier reached me on the King's Road, she said. I know about your sister. Jaime's jaw worked. He gazed at the heart tree's bleeding face instead of her eyes. I hope no bards would carve that verse. Truth warrants carving. She stepped closer, voice low but steady. You ended one madness to spare another. I slew a king, he said. And then a queen. Bookends of treason. Bookends of mercy, she countered. The city stands because of what you did. Jaime's hand rose to the scar ridging his forearm. People still whisper, Kingslayer, as if it's answer to every deed. They will add Queenslayer now. He forced a dry chuckle. Even the kinder historians will paint me an addict to regicide. They'll paint you what they choose, Brienne said. But the living you spared write a different chronicle each day. She looked at him, really looked, and he felt the weight of that gaze like armor he'd never worn. I would follow that story. His breath caught. He wondered if the heart tree listened, if its ancient red sap recognized penance when it bled. The realm rebuilds, he murmured, and I'm to chase quarry across it. Chase with allies, she corrected. Or chase peace. She touched Oathkeeper's hilt. We could guard grain trains to the gift, escort maesters to the twins, teach squire companies the craft of shielding. Sir Jaime the farmer's sentinel. He smiled, slow, genuine. It has a ring. Wind lifted Brienne's hair. She reached to tuck a strand behind ear, then let hand fall. People will always need shields. He exhaled. Then let's make them. Her answering nod sealed an unspoken compact. They stood in easy silence while above, ravens crossed the pinkening sky. That night the great hall overflowed. Long tables bent beneath plates of trout, venison, fresh greens coaxed from glass gardens, and wheels of sharp white cheese from newly rebuilt dairies in the rills. Casks of White Harbor stout lined walls. Lanterns swung from rafters, turning feasting faces gold. Lord Wyman raised a dripping fork. To Queen Daenerys, first of her name, breaker of winter's back, mother of dawn, he roared. Mugs clanged. Next Tormund stood on a bench, tankard in one hand, roast boar hock in the other, declaring, To the wee wolf, Bran the witch pup, who closed the night river. Laughter and stomping. The third toast came softer. Old Nan, hunched but unbowed, lifted her teacup, voice quavering. To the littlest of us, she said, who carry stories through storms. As applause subsided, Robb rose. His once boyish face bore new lines. but hope brightened his eyes. He spoke of barns built with southern marble, of garrisons shared by freefolk and Karstarks, of teachers riding to lonely holdfasts to explain letters in both common and old tongue. He named the dead with reverence: Jorian Talisa, Maester Luwin, Eddard Stark. Each name gained a murmured "Harry" from somewhere in the hall, as if the ghosts themselves answered. When he finished, instrument strings thrummed and a dance began, slow, courtly at first, then wild as mead warmed blood. Jaime slipped along outer walls, dodging spinning couples. Sansa twirled with Manderly's youngest. Arya darted between, blade of night's memory tucked safely in belt, though she practiced footwork as though every step might kill a foe. Near the dais Bran sat, hands folded. Jaime joined him. "You're quiet for one born with star-bright eyes," he said. Bran tilted head. "Music is memory's mother. Are you collecting tonight?" "Planting," Bran whispered. He leaned closer. "Spring won't stay if rootless." Jaime frowned, but Bran's lips sealed again. Later, outside the castle wall, Jaime found Jon Snow leaning against parapet, watching stars over dark pines. They spoke of small matters first: Grey Wind's new litter, Dragonstone's smith yields, Tyrion's latest joke about council quills. Then Jon asked the question Jaime had avoided: "Does it haunt you?" Jaime traced groove in parapet stone. Every breath. He looked toward flicker of torches in distant campfires where combined hosts slept. "But haunting and living cohabit. I choose which voice guides." Jon's nod carried understanding heavy as anchor. "Winter left marks on us all." He extended hand. Jaime clasped forearm, warmth pulsing through calloused grip. In that moment, Kingslayer and bastard, lion and wolf, found kinship iron would never craft but hardship had forged. Weeks passed. Stone towers grew, roads straightened, rumors of old grudges sloughed away as labor demanded hands. Across the narrow sea, trading cogs carrying Reach olives and Dornish figs arrived at White Harbor, escorted by Greyjoy longships that flew white sails trimmed in green, a sign of safe passage granted by Storm Queen's decree. In the Reach, Olenna Tyrell's grandchildren tilled fields beside freedmen from Astapor, learning new irrigation taught by Daenerys scribes. At King's Landing the Dragon Pit reopened, not to chain beasts but to harbor council sessions where lords and common folk argued allocations of grain, timber, glass, merited coin, and who would mend the eastern aqueduct first. On a bright noon under mild sky, Daenerys mounted Drogon before the refurbished Sept Square, not as conqueror but as envoy, to bring south seedlings of weirwood grown from Winterfell seeds. She planted them upon the Hill of Rhaenys, one for each kingdom, 7 in all. Small folk queued for hours to glimpse the white saplings, to touch pale bark that bled faint red sap, whispering hopes into its leaves, as though to new gods willing to listen. Tyrion stood beside the Queen, scribbling notes on city drainage. Davos speculated tariffs, with a Braavosi envoy. Varys smiled, content it seemed, though who could fathom spiders? News traveled north that spring rains fell early across the riverlands, washing old blood from field furrows. Small shrines honoring both the 7 and the old gods sprang beside roads. And from distant Vale came rumor of griffins nesting high again, an omen some called proof the world healed. Yet not all hearts thawed. South of Harrenhal, remnants of Goldcloaks banded behind Sir Godry Faring, refusing fealty to Dragon Banner. Near Crackclaw Point, muttered worshippers of Arhelor predicted Shadow Kings yet unvanquished. But in Winterfell's library, Samwell Tarly wrote in bright ink, "The battle for Dawn ended year 3 of the long winter. Red and black flames aligned, ice-sealed darkness. Seeds of a broader realm took root." Jaime read those pages one twilight, lantern guttering. He closed the tome, fingers tracing the last line. Then he stepped outside to join Brienne at the sparring circle, where young squires practiced. Snowdrops flecked the air, though none stuck to ground. Brienne corrected a lad's stance, pulling elbow in. Jaime watched, noting trust in the boy's eyes, the quiet respect in Brienne's nod. When lesson ended, she turned to him. "Hurl to Long Lake leaves at first light," she said. Old hold-fast walls need measuring. "I'll fetch my saddle," he replied. They walked the yard in growing dark, torches sputtering, moon pale through ragged clouds. Ahead, Arya pushed ale into Gendry's hand while teasing him about calluses. Sansa shepherded orphans from kitchens to newly built dormitory dachshunds. Robb practiced pen strokes with foreign envoys. Gray wind prowled rampart crowns like a silent sentinel. Spring still measured faith in cautious degrees, but each day its roots sank deeper. On the parapet, Bran closed his eyes, and for a heartbeat every leaf in the godswood shimmered silver, as if the entire forest exhaled relief. Jaime paused beneath a budding ash, burned hand resting on hilt of reforged longsword, not gilded, but simple, honest steel. A memory flickered. Cersei's last breath, her plea for the child. Somewhere in Dorne's lemon groves, Lyon Lannister studied letters under gentle tutelage, free of crowns and war. Jaime hoped memory kept its promise. "Ready?" Brienne called. He nodded. Together, they crossed drawbridge where icicles once hung like teeth. Moonlight sang on water beneath, and for the first time in a lifetime, Jaime heard the river, unchained and laughing. No bells tolled alarm. No horns cried night's approach. Only wind in young leaves and distant forge hammer pacing the heart's slow beat. It was enough. He spurred his horse beside Brienne's, following road that shimmered faint green in starlight. Dragon glass shards ground into gravel. A reminder beneath every step that darkness could be walked upon without sinking, so long as the way was forged together. And the wheel, long promised broken, creaked into new revolution. Not shattered, but reshaped. Its spokes tempered by frost and flame, its rim widened to bear weight of many banners. In its steady turning, the realm found rhythm again. Not perfect, not bloodless, but alive. Across that living land, storytellers sharpened quills, seeking endings in tidy knots. Yet no tale truly ended here, only branched. Rivers splitting to feed fields, roads diverging to distant coasts, songs modulating through unknown keys. Jaime rode beneath those open possibilities, Brienne's laughter at his side, dragon shadow crossing the moon above, and the world, fractured yet unbowed, spun onward into a dawn that tasted faintly of apple blossom and the distant roar of wings.